Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to do my first impressions of the new Death Guard Codex. Finally, after 3 years, we have the new Death Guard Codex, which is excellent, being one of the oldest codex there is at the moment. Now, this is just first impressions. I'm not going to get everything right in this one because we only get a few hours beforehand to really record and get this going, but I have done an extensive read through of much of the stuff and I will lay that out for you. How this is going to work is that I'm going to begin by giving you my overall thoughts. Now this includes both just a good news section and a bad news section. The reason I'm doing this is sort of for people who want to get very quick sort of summary of what I've seen. This will most likely be in here. Just people who want it quick, there you go. But obviously it might be people might go, I'm interested in hearing in that part. They want me to expand on it. I do expand on it throughout this. So that'll just be quick, general feelings on it so people can see. After that, I'm going to go into the chapter approved rules. This is just generally the secondary objectives you get from there. Detachment, abilities and rules. There's quite a few changes here that need to be updated for people to understand. There is stratagems, which I'll basically go over the ones that I have seen that have really highlighted or the ones I like. There is quite a few in this one. I believe there's now 31 stratagems, which is not too bad. There's also deadly pathogens, which I'll go into, warlord traits, relics, contagion discipline, and then finally it will be datasheets, which a large of them haven't changed. There is one big change that is making a difference, sort of, in a way, which a bit surprising to me, but answers a few questions. And then we'll look at sort of Mortarion, which is probably the big one I want to discuss, and the Lord of Virulence as well. But let's have a look firstly to begin with at my sort of overall feelings of the Codex. On to my overall feelings of the Codex. Now, obviously I said this is for people who just want the quick snippets, so this is giving you both the good things I've seen and the bad things I've seen. This isn't going to be basically, this is overpowered, or this is terrible. It's what I see that's maybe being a problem, things that are maybe exciting, that are really cool, and just generally it's going to be the quick fire stuff for you. Keep in mind, it's very easy for me to see the bad stuff because I know what's good from previous codexes, so I can see what's lost. Sometimes the changes that may be excellent, I might not pick up on them, today, because obviously once the player base picks up and finds out combinations that really work, they may come more to light. And hopefully my reviews, when you can actually see pages of the codex, you will actually be able to pick on some yourself. So it may sound more negative, but that's because I'm really checking for the things that worked before, and if they're there or not there. There may be excellent stuff that I really sort of missed. But I'm going to start with the good news, obviously. So Mortarion is better than expected. Does not get a certain amount of, damage ignoring per phase like the Nightbringer. That's what everyone was kind of hoping for. So that's not ideal. But he does, if he's the Warlord, which he should do, get a 5-up ignore damage save. This is because he has 3 Warlord traits plus gets an additional one from the sort of choosing the plague companies. General all abilities for supportive characters are far more balanced and more useful. Now this even goes to the fact that the Lord of Contagion, their ability, which I felt was a bit messy, is gone. It's largely been replaced with just the regular reroll ones to hit. I feel when it came down to sort of using a Chaos Lord versus a Lord of Contagion, the Chaos Lord may always win out, minus Typhus. Having that reroll now, I just feel makes them more useful, which is great because I never used the Lord of Contagion. I'm very excited to use one now. There is no Plaguebringers, no Nurglings, and no Beasts of Chaos, and I don't think the flying ones either for Death Guard. And I'm sort of happy with that because I really didn't like demons being in Marine Codexes. I felt it was just trying to fluff up the pages. I'm hoping that's for the Chaos Space Marine side as well. No one really used them because they did affect Legion traits. If you were going to bring demons as allies, you were going to take them in a separate detachment. Some people might say differently on that one. Certainly maybe in the Chaos Space Marine side, that was more the case that you didn't actually bring them along. I feel just getting them out of the Codex, having them in the Demon Codex is a lot cleaner, and I am much preferring that. Demon engines all being 3+ to hit. That is absolutely excellent. I am delighted to hear that when it comes to demon engines. It's just going to make sure that they're much easier to hit. They now all ignore the heavy rule. Excellent all round. I feel a large part of this may have been because many of the rerolls now are involved core units, and your demon engines are not going to be core units. Things like Hellbrute kind of are. but your demon engines aren't. So just making sure that 4+ hit was difficult with no rerolls now, that's even more difficult. This gives you a bit more of a guarantee, so I'm quite thankful for that. Generally, everyone went up by 1 attack. Now, just say in this one, what I mean by that is not your Poxwalkers, but your Plague Marines, your characters, everyone went up by 1 attack. But there is a cost to that, and that is, as far as I can see, no Hateful Assault. We do have, I think, is it the Malicious Volley, but we don't have Hateful Assault. So it's depending on you what you think is a loss there. We just get the attack built into our stats. If you compare them to basic tactical Marines, Plague Marines have 2 attacks, they don't need to worry about Hateful Assault. Not that generally people did, but very nice to have. I think people were hoping for 3 attack Plague Marines, which is still possible, and if you had Hateful Assault it could have gone up to 4, and I think that might have been crazy for Plague Marines, though it would have been awesome. Generally we don't have Hateful Assault as far as I can see anymore, so that's a bit of a loss, but the attacks did go up for just about everyone, and some of them a bit more, so that is useful as well, and it makes a very interesting idea of Plague Marine combat armies, which I'm excited to maybe try out. Stratagems, though many are gone, plenty of useful ones are, actually out already, but I do believe there is a whole bunch of new ones which I've found them to be quite to my liking. I've thought they're quite interesting, but you may find the ones that you may be depended on have either changed or gone. Cataphractii no longer slows you down in 4-inch movement and half advance. It still keeps the 4-up invul. That is excellent news. It means that, I know that inch doesn't seem like much, but it does help. I know one was really advancing in Cataphractii armour somewhere, but it didn't seem like so much of a thing. Keeping that 4-up invul, excellent. So on to the bad news. Now that's an interesting one. No death to the False Emperor. Where did it go? No one knows. There is some replacements in the general rule side for Death Guards, and I imagine that's going to be the same for Chaos Space Marines. I was actually very much dead against Death to the False Emperor. I felt having a army-wide unique mechanic that only affected certain opponents, although you do face a lot of Imperiums, but such a big rule that was like a mainstay for just about all Chaos, it felt very odd. Generally I would have wanted abilities that, like many other armies out there, you want abilities that happen in every game. The problem with also Death to the False Emperor is that maybe some games you just forget about because you maybe face 3 Xenos players then an Imperium. You just forget, and that is bad. As I said, no Hateful Assault, but all your attacks kind of went up by 1, so that's fine. Restrictions on Chaos Lords and Demon Princes in detachments. Now, I'm going to go into this a bit more detail, but this is a bit more of a problem that I think people are going to look at. This I think needs to maybe worked out. So there's a rule called Infernal Jealousy. You can include a maximum of 1 Lord of the Death Guard in each Death Guard detachment in your army. That affects a lot of units, and I will go into some more detail in this next section, which is like detachment abilities. But also you can include a maximum of 1 Demon Prince unit in each Death Guard detachment in your army. Now that's actually redundant because the Demon Prince is affected by Lord of the Death Guard. Very weird rule that, and it's going to cause more problems that I'll go into in more detail. The most abused stratagems, that this one may be dated now, like I think they are going to be dated, but like the zombie horde one, swamping, building up zombies, I don't think anyone's used that in a few years now, but it's largely gone. There is ways to regenerate zombies, but not by much. The throwing squads of grenades is largely gone as well. The stratagem for that has been changed slightly, it's nowhere near as effective. Kind of saddened by that. I think it's now limited to 3 models. You can still buff up those grenades, but it's only 3 models I think in certain units that be able to throw grenades. Nothing was better. I've heard a lot of people enjoy hucking 20 grenades with the buffs that could do like mortal wounds and stuff. It was crazy. That's kind of gone. Finally, this one's probably the biggest change I was a bit annoyed about, is in psychic abilities, Blades of Purification is gone and replaced by something that I do not think is nearly as good. Now, time will tell on that one, but I think Blades of Purification was one of my go-to psychic abilities for Death Guard, and it's a shame to see it go. Lord of Variance is mediocre and a little misguided, I believe. Now, I'll expand on this one because a lot of people asking questions. Its second aura ability is essentially reroll 1s to hit, then it has its Plague one, which was shown in the sort of community pages. Then you also have that stratagem which can be helped with it, but I don't think the stratagem is that good. I think this was a major misstep. I would have preferred something that it allowed, say, units that, demon engines within a range that did random shots. So this could be your photo bloat drones with their sprayers, it could be obviously your mortars, it could be your defilers. It allowed them to reroll the amount of shots that they get. Heck, it could have allowed, say, even maybe one or two of the units to reroll ones to hit, because you don't have that ability as much as well. I just feel that when they marketed it as an artillery character, the only reason why it's artillery is because of that stratagem. If it didn't have that stratagem, you wouldn't even know it. You'd actually say they're more of a plague augmenter, because that's what their rules kind of do. No Obliterators. Now, I would have loved Obliterators. If they put Obliterators into Death Guard, it would have opened up a lot more options in Death Guard Codex in terms of playstyle, including Havocs. They are not there in the Codex, and I feel it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I get why, because Games Workshop do not want to make rules for units that they don't actually currently produce, and I feel that the community could, Obliterators I think you could get away with in Death Guard quite a lot, because they have exposed muscle and plate, bursting out of plates. That's what Death Guard's about. I feel it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I can sort of understand it. Really hope that maybe they add it in a later date, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Missed opportunity. I think it would have been a great addition for Death Guard. Not to say they're overpowered or anything. Obliterators are very useful, and Havocs as well. I just think that in a Death Guard army it would have offered a lot of help. Relics to me are a bit underwhelming. Core units may be a bit limited, because Plague Marines, Black Lords, Death Shrouds, which are nice. Core units are a bit limited, and that's ones with core keywords. It's Plague Marines, Black Lords, Death Shrouds, Hellbrutes, and Death Guard Possessed. This limits our synergy abilities a wee bit, because a lot of them do require the keyword core. So there's quite a bit of a push for Plague Marines and other ones in that one. Largely highlighting we could, use some heavy weapon core units. As said, like Havocs, like Obliterators. When you look at the Space Marine side, they have so many options in that area. I believe Eliminators are core, and we know Eliminators are doing very, very well. But just having even Havocs, I don't think Obliterators are core, but even Havocs would have been really helpful for Death Guard. And that's something we didn't get, which is a bit of a shame on that one. There is another rule as well, which I'll go into as well, Disease Minions, which means that you can't have like a Poxwalker wide army. You really need to have at least one or two units of bubonic Astartes infantry, but I will go into that in a minute. So generally, to overall cap this, that was like key points just shoved out there. I know it's a lot of negative in that one, but there is a lot of cool stuff, and what I'll say is my overall feeling in the Codex is that I feel it's very balanced to the Necron Codex. Yep, we don't have the thing, like the Nightbringer, which was an auto go-to unit, but generally to the armies they do feel quite balanced. The Space Marines, on the other hand, are still leagues ahead, but that's because they have unbelievable amount of supplements that people can choose from. They have unbelievable amounts of new units and options to choose from. It really just begins to show in a way. In Death Guard's case, I just feel, it's fairly balanced Codex and gives a very much different ways to play. Because in the past, I was very much just pushing demon engines. It's going to change my playstyle, and I'm excited to really do that. Toning down the really broken parts of Death Guard Codex, not that there was many majorly broken parts, but balancing all out should mean more interesting stuff to see on the field. On to the first part of the Codex, really when it comes to the rules, is the chapter approved rules. Now this is essentially what is your secondary objectives. Every Codex is probably going to have this 3 to choose from. How useful they are really just depends on the actual way the playstyle of yourself and the army is, and then if these actually help with them. So there's 3 to choose from. There is a no mercy, no respite one called Fleeting Vectors. Now this is score 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if any enemy units failed to morale test this battle round that had 1 or more models destroyed by attacks with plague weapons this battle round. I feel for 3 victory points this is not much and not worth taking. There is many ways to ignore morale in this game. Few armies are more susceptible to it, but certainly others are not. I feel for the payback of 3 victory points, and it has to be by something that's used a plague weapon, or at least a unit that has lost a model due to a plague weapon, it's maybe a little bit restrictive for my taste. We also have a battlefield supremacy one. Now this one's interesting because there is 4 ways to score this, and even then I don't believe there's anything that says that you can't actually score these 4 in one turn. Now I'll go into them quite quickly, which is score 4 victory points at the end of the battle if you have 1 or more Bubonic Astartes unit wholly within your opponent's deployment zone and 1 of your Bubonic Astartes unit wholly within your deployment zone. Score 4 victory points at the end of the battle if you have 1 or more Bubonic units from your army wholly within 3 different table quarters. Those units are must be all more than 6 inches away from the centre of the battlefield, or score 6 victory points instead if you have 1 or more Bubonic Astartes unit from your army wholly within each table quarter, and those units are more than 6 inches away from the centre of the battlefield. Score 4 victory points at the end of the battlefield if you control more than half the total number of objective markers on the battlefield, and there are Bubonic Astartes units from your army within 3 inches of those objectives. And score 4 victory points at the end of the battle if your objective markers on the battlefield score victory points at the end of the battle if every objective marker on the battlefield is within contagion range of a contagion ability that units from your army have. Now, as I said, there's plenty of, that is a lot of ways to score points, and there are 4 or 6 points to score. Now, for certain armies this would be a delight because they have speed. Death Guard not so much, and a lot of these are Bubonic Astartes, which obviously are Plague Marines, are slow, though you can stick them in a Rhino, which does have that keyword. That'll make it a lot more useful, and then you do have things that come in reserve, such as Blight Lords, that help you a bit more board control. But your demon units, or your demon engine ones, will not help on this one, except for the last one, which is about having contagion range on all objectives. But the main thing on this one is that it is useful because it has so many ways to score, and if you can score all of them, then great. There's potential that you can maybe score like 8, potentially up to, 4, 8, and say we're using the 6 one. That's up to 14 points in a single turn, possibly. I think you can score them all on a turn. The last one is only at the end of the game. That's very interesting on that side, just because there's so many ways to score. Whether you have the speed to do or not, that is the question. The last one, though, is actually very, very good. This is Shadow Operations, Spread the Sickness. If you select this objective, then Death Guard infantry units in your army can perform the following action: Spread the Sickness. Action: 1 unit from your army can start to perform this action at the end of your movement phase if it's within 3 inches of an objective marker that has not been contaminated. See below. The unit cannot start this action while they're within or there are any enemy units, excluding aircrafts, within 3 inches of the same objectives. The action is completed at the end of the turn. When the action is completed, you can choose one of the following. Roll a d6 on a 4+, the objective marker is said to have been contaminated. The unit performing this action, or you can say the unit performing this action suffers d3 mortal wounds and the objective marker is contaminated. Score 3 victory points at the end of the battle for each objective marker on the battlefield that has been contaminated by a unit from your army. So why do I like this? Now, simply put, is that it is an end game objective marker 1, but you just need to get near that objective and then contaminate it. Most people will happily take that d3 mortal wounds. Sure, we don't have ways easily to ignore wounds anymore. They are largely kind of difficult to do now. There is ways to, but it is a bit more difficult. So I just find that if you're going to go on the battlefield, and this one is about battlefield control, you can contaminate, and it's only with your infantry you can contaminate. This is the only action that Poxwalkers take. I've been using Necrons a lot to get on objectives and raise the banner, which has been largely useful. This is something that if you can do early, just means you've got those guaranteed points early on in the game. I like it. It is one that, you know, if you're playing 4 objective markers, you're only going to score 12 points. That's not so handy. 6, then it gives a bit more leeway. I just feel that this one is a very good one to be able to move Poxwalkers onto, possibly move a Rhino and Plague Marines, but we all know that objective markers are important. They score a lot of points in your turn. Being able to land on them and then at the end of the game score more points can be very, very helpful as well. On to the detachment abilities, and also sort of I'm going to combine pages in this one. One's from page 40 and also one's from page 62 and 63, and these are like data sheet abilities such as plague weapons, contagions of Nurgle, etc. But I'm going to talk about the detachment abilities because these are quite different. So a Death Guard detachment is one that includes models with Death Guard keywords. If your army is Battleforged, then you gain these abilities. Death Guard detachments gain the Diseased Minions, Infernal Jealousy and Faulted Viron abilities. Bubonic Astartes in the Death Guard detachments gain Inexorable Advance. Plague Marines and Poxwalker units in Death Guard detachment gain Objective Secured. So, let's talk about the first rule, which is Diseased Minions. You cannot include more Plague Follower units than Bubonic Astartes core infantry units in each Death Guard detachment in your army, and you cannot include more Poxwalker units than Bubonic Astartes core infantry units in each Death Guard detachment in your army. The example they use is if a detachment includes 2 Plague Marine units and 1 Blight Lord unit, you can include 3 Death Guard cultist units and up to 3 Poxwalkers. So this limits that basically you can't just bring a whole Poxwalker army, which I'm kind of not liking. I did like having Typhus with nearly 100 Poxwalkers, or just zombies back in 7th edition. This is a bit of annoyance in a way, that we are a bit limited that we have to take these units, but it's not too much. For instance, if you took Blight Lords, then yeah, if you had 2 units of them, you could more than fill it up with Death Guard Cultist and Poxwalkers, or maybe if you have a unit of Plague Marines, but it just means that you do need to have more Marines in your army than you do really of these Cultists and Poxwalkers. Though you could just take one of each and that'd be fine. Infernal Jealousy, now this is one that I am a little bit annoyed about and I think may cause a few problems. You cannot include a maximum of 1 Lord of the Death Guard unit in each Death Guard detachment in your army, and you cannot include a maximum of 1 Demon Prince unit in each Death Guard detachment in your army. So why is this a problem? Units that appear to have the Lords of the Death Guard's keywords, or at least rule in it, are Demon Prince, Typhus, Death Guard Chaos Lord and in Terminator Armour, Lord of Virulence and Lord of Contagion. Mortarion does not, but then again he is kind of in the Supreme Commander detachment, so not really affected by it. So why is this also a problem? Secondly, that the Demon Prince part is largely redundant because they gave him the Lord of the Death Guard rule. It means that you can no longer take, for instance, the way I usually played it was Demon Prince and Typhus, or Demon Prince and maybe another Lord, or Lord of Contagion maybe. Didn't really use Lord of Contagion so much. But basically you cannot have as many of these Lords of Chaos, or in this case Death Guard, and I think that's a real problem. Secondly, it means largely if you're playing Battalion, your second HQ is gonna be a caster of some type. It's either going to be a Chaos Sorcerer in Terminator Armour, or it's going to be a Malignant Plague Caster, because nothing else that's an HQ choice doesn't have the Lord of the Death Guard's rule keyword. That is a problem in my mind. That is a real problem. I think that the fact that they include Demon Prince's second part of that makes me think that they may have made a mistake, including the Demon Prince as part of Lord of the Death Guard. It kind of makes sense, I get it, but I think it's maybe limiting the army a bit. I think it's okay, because I think in Space Marines 1 they were only allowed like 1 captain. And again, I sort of agree with this in a point, but the problem is we don't have enough HQ choices that are different, for instance lieutenants or anything like that. We only have casters, and that's limiting it and forcing you to go, well, one of mine is going to be one of these lords, one of them is going to probably be a caster. And I was never a big fan of the Death Guard casters in the first place. Knowing that, it looks like I am going to be forced into having to take them, which is not good. So not too happy about that. I really hope that they maybe think about adding new HQ units, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, or that they're going to change the Demon Prince at least from having Lord of the Death Guard keyword. I think that would largely please me in a way. Faulted Viron, you can include up to 3 Faulted Viron units in Death Guard detachment while only taking up 1 elite battlefield role choice. Each of these units must be from a different date sheet. This is like your, Apothecary or Plague Surgeon, I think they're called. I should know this. I play Death Guard, and I don't even play Space Marines. Yeah, so like your Plague Surgeon, your Tallyman, etc. They are all got the voted Viron. Essentially advisors in the elite choice. You know what would be nicer? Being able to include them in as an HQ instead. If they took up an HQ choice, I might have been a bit more... some of them are actually not bad. There is one I think that's been largely improved. But I do think they tried to sort of make, push these in the elite choice. Would have been nice to have them as an option in the HQ choice. It's making it probably more evident that there is not enough variety in the HQ choices for Death Guard. There actually really kind of is, but we've all been lumped into this sort of one keyword that's going to be quite limiting to them. Inexorable advance we have seen in posts. So this unit counts as having remained stationary if it did not fall back or advance in the previous movement phase. If this unit has a vehicle keyword, it does not suffer the penalty incurred to its hit rolls for firing heavy weapons at enemy units within engagement range. If this unit has the infantry keyword, it can ignore any and all modifiers to move characteristics, advance rolls and charge rolls. So what I'd say on this one is that being able to remain stationary is fine because it allows you to rapid fire bolters more. Now I'm not really a fan of bolters without a -1 AP, and there is plenty of ways in this codex to improve bolters. Now whether it's probably better to just have one big unit of bolters, whether it be Plague Marines or Blight Lords, probably if you're going to use bolters you're going to want to maximise those benefits on that one unit and make them more efficient. So it's helpful on that one, but overall fine there. If this unit is a vehicle, then it does not suffer the effects of being able to fire heavy when it's in engagement range. Again, it's sort of fine. The problem is a lot of our sort of heavy weapons are blast, which is not ideal, and if you're in engagement range with some vehicles, it's not ideal in general. There are things like the floated block drone and the Mythic drone, which I don't think it's Mythic drone, but basically those two units don't mind being in engagement range, but things like your crawler, you really kind of don't want it to be in engagement range because it is a bit of a pain. And the last one obviously is your infantry not being slowed down. Fine, I'm actually okay with that. I think there's maybe going to be more abilities coming out in various codexes that are going to limit people moving. It is a huge impact in the game. If you can limit someone moving, I've had it happen to me with some of my key fast units. They've been half their movement. It makes a heck of a difference. For us, I don't think it's the biggest effect because a large part you're going to lose about 2.5 inches because of our infantry. Maybe on the charge, if you actually half that, it'd be devastating. Yeah, being able to ignore them is nice, not overall killer. I think it is an improvement from the previous one. The maths may say different on that one, but when they did the last one and they said you ignore the heavy rule, it was kind of a spin in the face because we didn't have that many heavy weapons. I can see a bit more thought in this one, and if you want to push forward with a lot of your demon engines, then yeah, this might not actually be too bad. But overall, it's not the best sort of Legion trait. But what they do have is plague companies to sort of help with that as well. Now I'm going to jump on to page 60, which is the sort of datasheet rules. So we've got our plague weapons, which is obviously reroll 1s to wounds. Remorseless, this is what I feel was replacing Death to the False Emperor. Now obviously we've seen Remorseless already, it did come up in a post already. Each time a combat attrition test is taken for this unit, ignore any and all modifiers. I don't think that's actually too bad. Certainly with Death Guard I'm now more tempted to take them in bigger units. Now I don't think they go really above 10, so it's just nice to have that ability, keep a few in the game. Malicious Volley, which I will not repeat, it's largely I believe the same as before, but because of that it does mean our other abilities such as Inexorable Advance are a lot more useful. And Disgustingly Resilient, each time an attack is allocated to a model in this unit, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack. Just so you know guys, there is a few ways to get, you know, on a certain dice roll you can ignore wounds, but it is largely gone from the Codex. I believe the main one I saw was maybe a stratagem I saw, I don't remember seeing specifically off the top of my head. The Plague Surgeon does offer it, I believe, to Bubonic Astartes within 6 inches. He offers it only on 6s, and it might be core units as well, going to his data sheet later. And Poxwalkers naturally have it, but I believe it is only on 6s. So it's a bit of an interesting one to have that change from Disgustingly Resilient. We also have on the next page Contagion of Nurgle, which is your aura abilities. Now there is a few aura abilities that say they are Contagion aura abilities. These basically work with the Contagion rule, as in Battle Round 1 it's 1 inch, Battle Round 2 it's 3, Battle Round 3 it's 6, by around 4 is 9 inches. So later in the game, it gets wider. I would probably argue maybe it should, maybe at by around 3 it should have been 9 inches, and at by around 4 it should have been 12. That may be a little bit too good. That means one unit's got a bubble of 24 inches, wide, and then obviously if you've got the unit wide out, it might be a pain. So maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic. 9 inches is still pretty good. And then there's a couple of abilities for that one, but obviously nearly everything in your army is now got this -1 aura around it if everything in your army is death guard except for unaligned units. So that's very interesting, because to me that sets up the thought of, could we have more combat styled death guard? Because a -1 aura, toughness aura ability didn't really work for AdMech and their troops because they weren't very good. Some of our units are good in combat. On to Plague Companies. Now we sort of got a look at these when it came to Psychic Awakening, and they have changed slightly in this Codex. Now overall I'm not too excited about these. They are largely the same in that they offer a Warlord trait, a Stratagem and a Relic. Simply put, I think that's just to offer a little bit of variety between your Plague Marine armies. Gives you sort of an interesting way to have a Warlord trait or an X Relic or Stratagem that might be useful for your play style. Certainly though, an interesting part is that when we talk about Mortarion, that gets 3 Warlord traits, which are pretty good. He gets 1 to choose from each of these. He can choose whichever one he wants. You're probably going to choose one that may benefit your army, but there is one that I do think it is a bit better. So I will go into these quite quickly because there is, I think, 7 to choose from. Hey, the number of Nurgle, who would have guessed? So firstly we have the Harbingers. Now they have Stratagem. You use the Stratagem in the fight phase when a Harbinger's Poxwalk unit is selected to fight. Till the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes attack, you can reroll the hit roll. I think that's absolutely fine, being able to be a bit more accurate if you've got a big unit of 20 Poxwalkers. Do they go up to 30? I actually didn't check this beforehand, and the reason why I ask this is that, no they do not, is that you can have, I think it's 30 Poxwalkers coming out in the combat patrol. I don't think you can only field them unit of 20, so that'd be a unit of 10, a unit of 20, unit of 10, and a unit of, I think 7 Plague Marines as well. Almost a battalion, because I think you've got Typhus, and then if you had 1 more HQ, you'd be sorted, but that would have to be a caster. We will then go into, so that's okay. The other thing they did lose is I think they had a deep strike, I say deep strike, coming from reserve rule, from underground, from Psychic Awakening. That appears to be gone, and that hampers Poxwalkers a wee bit, because I did usually bring them in from reserve. I would bring them in when we got that rule. I did try it a few times to bring them in from reserve, maybe with Typhus as well, and that was quite good. That's largely gone. The Warlord trait in this one is Shamble Rot. While an enemy unit, excluding vehicles within Contagion range of this unit, at the start of your opponent's movement phase, roll a d6, subtract 1 if that enemy unit has a character keyword. On a 4+, that unit suffers a mortal wound, and on a 6 they suffer d3. Mortal wound aura ability is fine, but nothing to write home about. And then finally the Relic is once per battle at the end of your movement phase, you can select one objective marker in 3 inches. While the bearer is on the battlefield, that objective marker has the Contagion of Nurgle ability and is considered to have all the same Contagion abilities that the bearer has. Interesting one in that is that you can basically poison an objective and make it less appealing for your opponent. Really you want to hold on to as many objectives as possible, so it might be risky to poison one, then you have to leave it, or worse, your character holding relic dies. But it's just interesting because that will force many, if units then go on to that objective, they're going to be hindered obviously by the -1 toughness, etc, etc. So it does have an interesting use on that side. We have the Inexorables. Now use a stratagem, they have a stratagem called Ferric Miasma. Use the stratagem in your opponent's charge phase. When an inexorable unit from your army is selected as a target of charge, until the end of the phase, subtract 2 from charge rolls made for any unit that declares a charge against that inexorable unit to a minimum of 1. Really like this one because that just means that if someone tries to charge you, a unit that is key on objective you don't want to be charged, you can go right -2 to anyone who tries to charge them, not just one unit. And that's quite nice. -2 does make a heck of a difference, especially if something tries to come in from reserve, 9-inch charge. That makes it an 11-inch charge, and that's going to make your opponent think twice. So, bit useful, not bad stratagem. We also have the Warlord trait, Ferric Blight. Ferric Blight's Contagion ability. Many of these Warlord traits are Contagion abilities. They get, they move up in range with the Contagion battle round. While an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, each time an attack is made by a friendly inexorable unit against that enemy unit, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. So interesting side. I actually really like this as a Warlord trait. It means that you essentially have a -1 upgrade on your character because they should be affected by that. I don't think there's anything that says that they aren't affected by it, but I could be wrong. But it doesn't say core or anything on it, it just says if you have the inexorable keyword. So that might be handy to add -1, but also I think it affects things like shooting attacks. As long as you have that unit within contagion range of your Warlord, they will be affected, and then ranged attacks can affect them. One thing I would say when it comes to these contagion ones is I don't believe Mortarion, though he may take one of these contagion rules or Warlord traits from one of these play companies, he does not gain that play company keyword as far as I'm aware. He just generally doesn't get a play company keyword, he's kind of exempt from it, and it doesn't prevent your army from getting a play company keyword. So fine, I think that's interesting. I'd be mainly interested with quicker units such as Demon Prince to fly in with Warlord trait and maybe try and have a unit that has now a debuff of -1 AP on it from all threats. So that might be quite nice. Relic, Leech, Spore, Casket, inexorable model only. Each time an enemy model is destroyed as a result of a melee attack made by the bearer, select one friendly inexorable vehicle model within 18 inches of the bearer. The model regains 1 lost wound. No more than 3 wounds can be regained per turn due to this relic. Fine. Ways to recover on vehicles. It is a good range. See, if this was 6 inch, it would be absolutely terrible. 18 inches does give you access to other units that may be a bit further away. So also quite nice. Mortarion's Anvil, though, they have a stratagem called Relaptic Assault. Use the stratagem in your opponent's charge phase. When an enemy unit finishes a charge move, select a number of Mortarion's Anvil units from your army of 3 inches of the enemy unit. Until the end of the phase, selected units are eligible to perform heroic interventions as if they were characters. I think this one's a bit messy. It can work, I would need to try it out. I just think it's generally a bit of a messy one. Now, one thing I would note is that this is where it gets quite interesting. Warlord trait, Glooming Bloat. This Warlord has the following ability: Glooming Bloat, Contagion. While an enemy unit is within contagion range, that enemy unit cannot fire Overwatch or set defend. Each time model in that enemy unit makes an attack, the hit roll and wound roll cannot be rerolled. So why do I like that? Simply because if you use this one on Mortarion, that essentially is, he's always going to have, I think, turn 4 Contagion, so this is going to be a 9 inch aura. If you're making an under 9 inch charge, which Mortarion with his speed probably can, that's going to stop Overwatches and set defense, and to other units that may be charged by other units because they're in Contagion range. But also shutting down rerolls to hit and wound is very interesting. I'd say this one is the one that if I was going to take Mortarion, this is the one that's been attracted to me the most in terms of extra Warlord trait. His other Warlord traits are good, this might be a handy wee addition. Next up we have their Relic, which is actually also quite good. It's simply Mortarion's Anvil model only. Each time bearer makes a melee attack, you can reroll the hit and you can reroll the wound roll. Reroll hit and wound rolls on a Demon Prince, sign me up, because they no longer get the core, well, they no longer benefit from their reroll because they don't have the core keyword. So if you were to go anyone to take a Relic, this is probably the way to go. If I had a bear stratagem, this would almost be the one I would almost always take. Next up, we have the Wretched. So the Wretched have stratagem, requisition stratagem. Use the is called just Wretched, Sevenfold Blessing. Use the stratagem before the battle. When you're mustering your army, select one Wretched Psyker model from your army. That model knows 1 additional Psyker power, and it can also do a once per battle reroll of their Psychic test. Fine, again, I don't think it's anything to write home about, as it's a one-off reroll and 1 additional Psychic power. That is a stratagem as well. Warlord trait is Eater Plague. The Eater Plague is Contagion. While an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, each time an attack is made by a friendly Wretched model against the enemy unit, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target. Now, this one I'm a little bit more excited about because, again, if you have Mortarion, if you was to take this one, is a 9 inch bubble of his at all times, because I believe he has turn 4 Contagion all throughout. This means that any ranged attacks on units that are affected by this contagion, an unmodified roll of 6 is another hit, automatically wins. Just means you don't need to roll to wound. He's got a big aura ability, he's got a big base as well. Very interesting, very tempting. The relic is the Demon's Favour, which is rich and multiplied caster model only. The bearer's Pestilent Fallout ability changes so that it's whenever you cast a 7 or more, close to enemy unit within 12 inches D3 mortal wounds, and within 6, if you don't get that 7 plus, it's just 6 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. It's a bit of an upgrade, but in terms of relics, not too exciting. We then have the Poxmongers, which is their stratagem is called Bilious Blood Rush. Use a stratagem in the shooting phase when a Poxmonger Demon Engine unit from your army is selected to shoot. Till the end of the phase, models in that unit can make attacks with blast weapons against a unit within engagement range of that unit. Each time a ranged attack is made by a model in that unit against an enemy unit within engagement range, they add 1 to the attack's hit roll. Now I can see that being handy obviously for your demon engines, particularly the mythic haulers. They can essentially use their missile launcher as if it was the crack variety, and then they just lay into them, and that'll affect all of them, and they get +1 to hit, which is quite nice. Might be good for your Defiler with its blast cannon, might be good for a Plagueburst Crawler. You never know. It's not bad. Their Warlord trait, Sanguis Flux. While an enemy unit is within Contagion range, the enemy unit suffers -1 leadership and -1 combat attrition. Again, we're yet to see more armies affected by morale in this edition. Last edition we have found ways around it, so I'm not that delighted. Relic, Iron Clot Furnace, Poxmongers model only. The bearer has the following ability. In your command phase, you can select one friendly Poxmonger Demon Engine unit within 6 inches of the bearer. Till the start of your next command phase, that Demon Engine has a 4-up invul. Most Demon Engines do already have 5-up invul, so whether this one is worth or not is debatable. Imagine if we had a big Lord of War, similar like the Khorne Lord of Skulls. Imagine a Lord of War choice. That isn't Mortarion. That was like a Demon Engine, you could give 4-up invul. That'd be really, really nice. Here, it's kind of okay. So there might be ways to use that one. Originally I'd probably say that the stratagem is the strongest part of them. The Ferrymen. So the Ferrymen have a stratagem. Theirs is on droning wings. Use a stratagem in your command phase. Select one Ferryman Foated Viron model from your army. Select one of the model's aura abilities until the start of your next command phase. Add 6 to the model's range up to a maximum of 12. Now this is of the Foated Viron, so this is the elite choice characters. Don't think that's probably the best one. Keep in mind they're called ferrymen, so they're obviously going for which one of them is meant to be a sort of ferry? It's the ones with the scythes. I could be wrong on that one, I'll have a look on that one. But basically they're going for the Foated Virons. Not the best choice I think for that upgrade. Or trait, the droning. The droning, while an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, at the start of your opponent's movement phase, have the enemy unit's move characteristic until the end of the phase. Now the problem with this one is that it's within contagion range, which has a maximum of turn 4 being on turn being 9 inches. Yeah, that might be handy to slow someone down with this, but ultimately, and isn't, you know, if it was like Mortarion 18 inches, he's slowing everyone down around him, maybe it's fine, but ultimately might be a bit later in the game. Not quite sold on it, but I think people might be able to pull out some cool stuff with that one, so it's one to keep an eye on, and that is the Warlord trait, the droning. Lastly is their relic, which is the Ferryman Scythe. Now this can be used on anyone with a Ferryman model equipped with a Man Reaper, and it's essentially the same as a Man Reaper, which has a few changes to it, but ultimately their Scythe ability, which they've now added to the Man Reapers, we'll go into that later. Instead, is each time you make an attack, it attacks with 3 you do 3 hits instead of 1 for its attacks. Man Reapers now have a Scythe ability that's a bit weaker, but it does 2 attacks for every 1 attack you've got. This pumps up to 3, so it is not too bad. If you are facing hordes, it's going to be a real help. Lastly, Mortarion's Chosen Sons. They have a stratagem called Plague Brewers. Use a stratagem in the shooting phase when a Mortarion's chosen unit from your army is selected to shoot. Till the end of the phase, Plague Belchers, Plague Spurt Gauntlets and Plague Spears models in that unit are equipped with have damage characteristic of 2. Now I don't see you being able to have too many spears. Maybe in a Plague Marine army, Plague Marine unit, you might be able to have probably the heavy version and the regular version. I think you can have 2 of one only of the heavy version. Could be wrong, but if there is a way to get 4 of the sort of flame abilities and they're all damage 2, maybe something to think about. It might be quite nice. If we had one unit, like say we had Chaos Chosen, and they could all have flamers, or in this case Plague Spurts, or Plague Belchers, this would be very, very nice. But because it only affects one unit and they can't all be armed with plague weapons that spew, kind of a bit difficult in that one. Warlord trait, Nurgle's Fruit, which is on the Warlord trait. This Contagion, while an enemy is within the Contagion range of this unit, each time an attack is made by a friendly Mortarion's Chosen Sun model against that unit, the target does not receive cover. Again, very much this is about, throwing plague spurting guns, trying to avoid cover in that one. Lastly, the relic is the Vomitrix, and it's spelled absolutely awesome. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but it's like Vomitryx. Cool. I love it. And it basically upgrades the character with the Foul Blightspawn with their sprayer. It changes that from a D6 to Assault 7. Not bad. That unit has changed in terms of it's no longer, I think, is it 2d6 strength, it's now just strength 7. Still strong for a flamer in a lot of senses, and its range is 12, so being able to be an Assault 7 on that one is not too bad. I know the Foul Blightspawn was sort of, some people saying, a really good unit. I never used it so much. Whether people are going to be upset that's now a straightforward strength 7, they're going to be disappointed by it, I don't know. I'm actually quite happy with it. I also think it changed, and I'll talk about it later, from D3 damage to 2 damage. Could be wrong on that one. Pretty sure that's right. I'll get to that datasheet. If you want to go to skip to datasheets, you can get it there. But essentially, that is an upgrade for that unit. So that is your play companies. What I'd say about that one, it really just depends on your play style. I think the stratagems are largely to upgrade a unit or hinder them, and then you have a couple of warlord traits and relics that are nice there. I think Mortarion does benefit a lot from these as well, being able to choose one of them, and I think it's just really going to do a small upgrade. It's not going to be game changing. Part of me really wanted this to be game changing in terms of how you play Death Guard, but I don't think it's going to make a hugest of difference. It's nice to have, and it's nice to see they've changed them up a wee bit, but I don't see, I don't see where it's going to change my thoughts of playstyle too much. On to stratagems. So when it comes to the Death Guard Codex beforehand, we had 14 stratagems to use, and in Psychic Awakening we had a further 21 to use. In this new codex we've now got 31, so that's kind of a little bit more useful in terms of we've got a little bit less, but I feel in a lot of senses they are a lot more focused. What I'm going to do is I am going to focus on the top stratagems that I feel are most useful in terms of my play style and the things that I've seen that are quite good. There may be combinations that people may see later in the date. Obviously we've only had a few hours to look at this, but there may be a few stratagems that people say, oh wow, that works well with this combination. I might not see, but the ones I'm going to highlight here are the ones I've seen. I'm like, that is quite good or could be used in a good combination. So with that, let's have a look at some of the stratagems. So we've got Creeping Blight here, which is a 1 command point stratagem. Use this stratagem in the fight phase when a Death Guard unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the fight phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack with a plague weapon on an unmodified wound roll of 6, that attack has an armor penetration characteristic of -4. This can be really nice. Essentially the Plague Marines and Blightlord Terminators, and also the Death ones, we have a lot of access to Plague combat melee weapons. This gives you a high access to -4 AP. Yes, you may need to roll 6s to wounds, but when you have Plague Marines that have potential of 3 attacks each, there is a lot of potential for that to do quite well. At 1 command point, this is certainly something I would keep in mind. Next up, we also have Fire Fever. So this is 1 command point. Use a stratagem in your shooting phase when a Death Guard Hellbreak model from your army is selected to shoot. Until the end of the phase, that model can only target a single eligible enemy unit, and each time an attack is made by that model, add 1 to the attack's hit and
wound roll for that unit. So this largely replaces Fire Frenzy. In a big way, I kind of actually prefer this. Fire Frenzy forced you to target, though you may have got to shoot twice, it forced you to target the nearest enemy unit, and if your opponent was smart, they can mitigate that. This way you still had the option of choosing any unit on the field, but you also get +1 to it and +1 to wounds. On a missile and last cannon Hellbrute for one command point, this could be really, really awesome. So I think if you even got one Hellbrute in the backfield, last cannon missile launcher, that's a lot of damage you can put on the backfield of your opponent. So really quite nice. We've also got Vermid Whispers, which is 1 command point. Use the stratagem in the shooting phase when a Death Guard Terminator unit from your army is selected to shoot, or in the fight phase when a Death Guard Terminator unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in the unit makes an attack, add 1 to their hit rolls. So it's straightforward, add 1 to hit rolls a stratagem. Simply put, this is very handy. You've got obviously your rerolls from your plethora of Death Guard Lords that allow you to reroll 1s to hit. This makes Blight Lords able to hit on 2s. Heck, even makes your Death Shroud units go back up to 2s to hit. Very, very, very useful. I'd highly recommend this if you're using a big unit of Terminators. Very helpful. You might have a Blight Lord unit with plasma guns, with melta guns, etc. This makes them highly more accurate and a lot more useful. So yeah, I can imagine when it comes to Blight Lord Terminators, this is going to be extremely useful. From there, we're going to go with Haze of Corruption. Haze of Corruption is 2 command points. Use the stratagem in the fight phase when a Death Guard core unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time an enemy model is destroyed by an attack made by a model in that unit, any excess damage inflicted by that attack is not lost and is instead suffered by another model in that unit. Do not make a saving throw for the model. This continues until there's no excess damage remaining. So one thing to mention this one is that Flail of Corruption has lost this ability to continue damage. It is a bit of a loss and a bit saddening, but what made it unique, unfortunately, is gone. I feel that if you've got a big combat unit such as Plague Marines, Blight Lord Terminators, or even Death Shrouds, this is a go-to stratagem. 2 command points. For instance, if you think that you're going to cause a huge amount of damage that may carry on to other models in that unit, definitely worth considering. I think a lot of armies would really love this kind of stratagem, and I think it's actually going to continue into other armies. It's nice to see it here. Sad that we've lost it from the Flail of Corruption, but it's nice to see that we can then apply it to a whole bunch of other sort of melee weapons. So that's kind of cool in a way. Next up we have Eternal Hatred. So this one may be a controversial one. Use this stratagem in the shooting phase when a Bubonic Astartes infantry unit from your army is selected to shoot, or in the fight phase when a Bubonic Astartes infantry unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to the attack's wound roll. And this is 2 command points. So this is essentially replacing Veterans of the Long War. Why is it changing to Eternal Hatred? I can only imagine when it comes to Chaos Space Marines update, they want to have their Renegades, because they made a huge thing about Vigilus in them, that they want them to have access to Veterans of the Long War, which is that +1 wound access. At 2 command points, I kind of accept this. Being able to augment wounds is very difficult compared to augmenting hits, so adding +1 to wound is really, really good. Honestly, I thought we were actually going to completely lose a stratagem that allowed us to augment wounds. So being able to have it still here at 2 command points, I can wholeheartedly agree with. I put so much command points just going Veterans of the Long War, Veterans of the Long War, Veterans of the Long War. At 2 command points, it's going to make me reconsider and think about other stratagems, but it's still something that I think is highly usable. Next up is going to be Diseased Effluence. So Diseased Effluence is 1 command point. Use the stratagem in your command phase. Select 1 Death Guard character model from your army, excluding deemed models, and 1 enemy unit within engagement range of that model. That model suffers 1 mortal wound, and then roll 1d6 on a 2+. The enemy unit suffers 2d3 mortal wounds. If the enemy unit is a character, excluding vehicle units, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. So I think this is really good. I really didn't like this sort of spend 1 command point, get D3 mortal wounds. It could be handy in some ways, but being able to go for 2 D3 mortal wounds, that's a potential of 6 mortal wounds, it can help you finish off a unit. My example is that this is done in your command phase. It may be you've chopped a couple of wounds off each other. Your opponent may be down to 2 wounds. If you activate this stratagem and you lose a wound for it, on a 2+, your opponent will die because it's 2d3 unless they're a character. There's a lot of options for this one. It's 1 command point. Yes, you suffer mortal wounds, but it may be quite interesting on that side. And again, it may be 2d3 mortal wounds. If it's against a vehicle character, even more tempting. So something I really think that's worth paying attention to. Next up, we have Belching Fumes. So Belching Fumes is 1/2 command points. Use a stratagem at the start of your opponent's shooting phase. Select 1 Mythic Blight Hauler unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, each time an enemy model makes an attack with a ranged weapon against that unit, reduce the number of attacks made with the weapon by 1, to a minimum of 1. If that unit contains 2 or fewer models, this stratagem is 1 command point, otherwise it is 2 command points. So the Mythic Blight Haulers have actually become a really key unit, especially when we transferred from 8th to 9th. They were really key that they've actually gone up at 90-40 points in cost. Basically they were like really highly rated, so that's an interesting side to see in that one. This is a very defensive one and an interesting one. We've never, as far as I can see, seen a stratagem or an ability that reduces the amount of attacks of a ranged weapon. It's usually melee. So to be able to go, if you had, for instance, something that had, heavy 6, it becomes heavy 5, or heavy 3 becomes heavy 2, and it's per, it affects the whole unit. In fact, I believe whenever someone attacks the Mythic Blight Haulers, it affects them. So it doesn't just affect one unit, it affects multiple units. Each time an enemy model, so it affects each model that targets them. That is fantastic. It really gives them a lot more survivability. Now, whether they're still worth their points at 140 is debatable, but for 2 to 3 command points, 1 to 2 command points, really debatable in that one. Your opponents lightly, once they see how devastating they can be with missile launchers and multi-melters, may put up a lot of firepower into them. This may be quite worth it just to give them that extra bit of protection. 1 to 2 command points, very interesting, we'll see how it goes. Next up is Blight Bombardment. So I didn't want to talk about this one after we had seen the community update. Now we have seen it now after I've recorded this, but I felt it's still quite essential to talk about it because there's a little bit more to talk about. It is 2 to 3 command points. Use stratagem in your command phase. If a Death Guard Warlord from your army is on the battlefield, select 1 point in the battlefield and place a marker on the point. At the start of your next command phase, roll 1d6 for each unit within 6 inches of the centre of the marker. Add 1 if the unit being rolled for is infantry, and subtract 1 if the unit being rolled for is character. On a 2 to 6, they suffer d3 mortal wounds. On a 7+, they suffer d6 mortal wounds. The marker is then removed. If the Warlord is a Lord of Virulence keywords, this stratagem is 2 command points, otherwise it's 3 command points. So I really don't like this stratagem, mainly because of the fact that yeah, you can easily cause mortal wounds, but your opponent has to stay still for a whole turn. I think the useful side of this stratagem is actually disrupt your opponent's movement. Basically, if they're towering up, I know David sometimes does Imperial Fists, you can basically go, right here is a point, if you stay there for a turn, you're going to suffer a lot of damage. Vehicles won't worry about this, they'll just move away and they can move more than 6 inches away, so it's fine. And then you may have infantry that might be a bit disruptive, but largely they should be able to get out of that 6-inch aura ability. So what I'd say is that in terms of damage potential, this isn't very good, but in disruption abilities, it may be quite good, but is very, very dependent. I'd say at 2 command points, it seems a little bit fair, seems okay. At 3, maybe a bit costly, and to make your Lord of Virulence your Warlord, completely out of question. Your Lord of Virulence is very unlikely to be your Warlord, and we'll talk about that later. But simply put, this is the start of why the Lord of Virulence is a little bit not calculated correctly. The character should have been more towards artillery rather than a single stratagem. But again, we will speak about that a little bit later, but keep this in mind when you look at the Lord of Virulence. Overwhelming Generosity, this is 1 command point. And use a stratagem in your shooting phase when a Death Guard unit from your army is selected to shoot. Until the end of the phase, add 6 inches to the range of characteristics of plague weapons models in the unit that they are equipped with. So this can be this can happen with a few things. For instance, the Lord of Virulence can become an 18-inch heavy 2d6 plague weapon that auto hits. That can be quite nice. His heavy flamers 2d6, really good on that one. It may also work with other stratagems in here as well to make other weapons plague weapons. Simply put, if you've got a lot of plague weapons, adding 6 inches, it can be really handy. Now, I had a look at this one. It's actually only overwhelming generosity. Yep, that's fine. When it comes to our next stratagem, which is Virulent Rounds, which is use a stratagem in the shooting phase when a Death Guard core unit from your army is selected to shoot. Until the end of the phase, bolt weapons models in that unit are equipped with become plague weapon abilities. This is super handy on your Plague Marines and obviously your Blight Lord Terminators. Your Plague Marines, now they can have unit upgrades such as your Blight Launchers and your Plasma Guns, and they may only be a 10-man squad, but being able to make those bolters plague weapons for 1 command point, very handy. When it comes to Blight Lord Terminators, even more so, because if you had a 10-man squad, then they're going to be doing rapid fire 40 if they drop in, made them all plague weapons. Excellent. Even then, you can give them Virulent Rounds, and I presume if you you can make them Overwhelming Generosity. I presume it stacks, so let's imagine that you give them Virulent Rounds, which makes them all their bolters plague weapons. Overwhelming Generosity, if you need the extra range, can give a 6-inch range to those plague weapons. You can then maybe give them Vermin Whispers, which gives all those Terminators +1 to hit, meaning your Terminators are hitting and choose plague weapons, which is your bolters. And then you also have Eternal Hatred for another 2 points, which is going to add 1 to the wound rolls. Now the problem with bolters is, of course, for the Blight Lords, they're not -1 AP. There's a few ways to get around that, but largely this is a way to make them a little bit more efficient. But keep in mind, they can have Blight Launchers, they can also have Reaper Autocannons, which have improved AP. There's a few ways to make them a little bit better as well. But I certainly think that Virulent Rounds for 1 command point, making your bolter weapons into plague weapons, was something that was badly needed. I would argue that maybe if you spent 2 to 3 command points making your whole armies worth of bolt weapons, plague weapons, would be even better, but let's stick with what we've got on that one. Those are the stratagems that I've seen that really highlighted to me. There's plenty of other stratagems there, that's only highlighting about 10 to 11 of them. There's roughly about 30 plus of the stratagems. I'm really interested to hear what you think.
On to Deadly Pathogens. Now this is our sort of upgrade that's similar to Cryptics and Necrons, and then into our upgrades in the Spaceman Codex. I believe it was you could upgrade champions within Chapter Command. It's similar to that one, and we've seen a bit of ideas in this one. What this is really an upgrade to Death Guard character models or Bubonic Astartes models with the champion keyword. A Deadly Pathogen is essentially an upgrade ability to your weapon. It firstly adds 1 to the weapon strength, which might be a few cases that brings up to 8, which is obviously a very nice number. We really want our strengths, really want sort of 8 or 9. Really helps quite a lot. And it also increases the power rating of the model by 1, and they also gain an extra ability. Now, for their points, a lot of these being between 20, 15, 10 points, it is debatable whether they are completely useful as well. I'd probably be interested to see which ones that can help. The other thing to mention as well is that you have to select it on 1 plague weapon, which largely doesn't help the Demon Prince, which would be my go-to for an upgrade like this. But the Demon Prince does have an upgrade on itself that is largely going to make it a lot better anyway, so you wouldn't maybe want to put them on here anyway. The main point is that we do have these upgrades to weapons to make your guys, your characters and your champions a little bit more fearsome, but I don't know if they're worth it, but we'll have a quick discussion of them. So remember that they come packaged with +1 strength on them, and they have to be a plague weapon. So you can make one of them. Armor penetration characteristic is improved by 1. This is 20 points, by the way. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. This cannot be cumulative with the Tollkeeper ability. That one is pretty nice if you do have plenty of attacks, which there is a few ways to get nice 5, maybe even reaping attacks that can cause lots, so that's quite nice. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target in addition to any normal damage. Again, I think that might be quite good for ones that can reap. You know, you've got your scything abilities that can you can do nearly 2, if not with a relic 3 attacks, so I see that being quite nice there. Befouling runoff. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, the target does not receive the benefit of cover against this attack. I imagine this is going to be on like plague spears or things your HQs that are ranged plague weapons. Unstable sickness. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, if an enemy models are destroyed by that attack, roll a d6. On a 4+, that model unit suffers 1 mortal wound, up to a maximum of 3 mortal wounds. The bearer cannot be selected for the Befoul Incubator stratagem. Largely okay on that one, a good way to get an extra couple of mortal wounds. I kind of think I'd much rather go with the ones that are maybe reaping attacks. We're then going to go into Corrosive Filth. Each time an attack is made with this weapon against the vehicle unit, add 1 to the damage characteristic of that attack. Very situational depending on the army that you're playing against, but one to bear in mind. And then Vicious Death. Each time you roll to determine the number of attacks made with this weapon, you can re-roll the result. I think again that's going for like your plague spear type weapons. Really, I think there's a bit more favourable on the, I think is the Man Reaper, that does have the, you can scythe attack on them now, and that gives you plenty of attacks, and then that gives you plenty of upgrades. The -1 AP, though expensive on the Man Reaper scything one, does mean instead of being -1 AP it's -2, which might be not bad with the amount of attacks it gets. The one that gives you an extra attack every time you run a modified hit roll of 6 is also good, and then the one where an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts a mortal wound on the target in addition to any damage. So there's a few there that are interesting to try out. It just really depends on how you cut out your death card characters if you want to make them a little bit more dangerous. Now we are going to go into our Warlord traits here. So the Warlord traits, kind of hard to talk about this one as I want to talk about Mortarion later, because a lot of this is kind of important to Mortarion, but I will summarise this and maybe I will mention them actually here. Mortarion has 3 Warlord traits on this page and then 1 from the Plague Companies in a total of 4. Now this seems fun, but that means there's a lot of rules about him all over the place. Really, quite frankly, I'd prefer if all the rules for him were just on one data sheet. Be that as it may, let's go into the Warlord traits. So we have, so just to mention this, each time you determine Warlord trait, Mortarion replaces all instances of Plague Company keyword in that Warlord trait if any of them have that sort of idea. So Revolting Resilient, each time this Warlord would lose a wound, roll a d6. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. So as you're discussing Resilient, and yes, Mortarion does have that, so giving him that little bit more staying power. Excellent. We then have Living Plague. While an enemy unit is within 3 inches of this Warlord, that unit cannot be affected by aura abilities, excluding those by psychic powers of units from your opponent's army. And again, Living Plague, this does also affect Mortarion. So very thematic that psychic abilities do get through. He does hate them all so much. But being able to shut down aura abilities, and it's one you don't need to be in range, I believe, of the unit that's given the aura ability, just of the units being affected, is really quite nice. So that could be very, very useful. We then have Hulking Physique, which is add 1 to the wound characteristic of your Warlord. Each time an attack is made against the Warlord, an unmodified wound roll of 1, 2, 3 always fails, irrespective of any other abilities of that weapon or that model making the attack. Arch Contaminator, while friendly Plague Company core unit is within 6 inches of the Warlord, so this has changed. It used to be my go-to Warlord trait. Each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack with a plague weapon, you can reroll the wound roll. Each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack with a plague weapon that targets a unit within 12 inches, you can reroll the wound roll. Mortarion has this one as well. Bit of a hit on this one because obviously I think GW recognised how much this was a go-to one, because you'd sit back with a Lord or even a Mortarion next to Plagueburst Crawlers, and then they would just be rerolling a bunch of their poisoned weapons or even floated bloat drones. They've now said you've got to be up close and personal if you want to benefit from that. It's still not bad. I mean, like, imagine if you had 3 floated bloat drones plus Mortarion going around its edge, and then you're just spraying wounds everywhere. Could be quite nice. I like it for the melee version though. That might be quite interesting to see as well. Now, because that says, replace all instances of Plague Company keywords in the Warlord trait, if any, for Mortarion to Death Guard, I believe that might actually affect him. So does that give him reroll 1s to wounds? Because he's got Plague Weapon? I'm going to have to check that, because I know that they're trying to stop HQs and big creatures getting rerolls. But I think that would affect him. Keep that in mind. Rotten Constitution, add 1 to toughness characteristic of this Warlord. Each time an attack with an armor penetration characteristic of -1 or -2 is allocated to the Warlord, that attack has an armor penetration characteristic of 0. Another endurance one, not bad. Ultimately, I would sort of maybe go with a Disgusting Resilient if you're not taking Mortarion as your Warlord. I'd almost go with Disgustingly Resilient, but hey, interesting one to have as well. And then finally, Foul Effluence. While an enemy unit was within 6 inches of the Warlord at the end of the movement phase, roll a d6 for that unit. On a 4+, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So ultimately, if you could take Mortarion, I think with all the abilities he gets from this, he's gonna be your Warlord. Typhus gets Shamble Rot, which is your one from your Plague Companies. This one gives him the ability to cause mortal wounds around him in the command phase. Ultimately, there's a lot of staying power ones here. Maybe if you're going like a Demon Prince, having that 5-up Ignore might be quite nice. That on top of the new Disgusting Resilient could be quite cool. But ultimately, when I see Warlord traits now in Death Guard, I'm kind of going, oh, Mortarion. But the problem is, he does cost a lot of points as well. Either way, I do think they are quite nice in on themselves. Let's go on to Relics next. So I wasn't too impressed with Relics. I will go over them all quickly. There was one highlight here I thought was quite good. One thing to say sadly is that Suppurating Plate has been nerfed. So, Reaper of Glorious Entropy. Models equipped with Man Reaper or Plague Reaper only. This relic replaces the Man Reaper or Plague Reaper and has the following profile. Melee, ×2 strength, -3 and 3 damage. Plague Weapon, each time an attack is made with this weapon, unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts a mortal wound to the target in addition to any other damage. Quite good if you're going for a Man Reaper or Plague Reaper, but it doesn't have the sweeping ability, which I think Man Reapers have, but I could be very wrong on which one they are. It's basically the ones that Death Shrouds are carrying have got the ability to reap, and they are Man Reapers, so essentially you'd be giving up your reaping ability for a far more, much more damaging and mortal wound going. I don't think that is possibly the biggest sort of change you want to do. Plague Skull of Golgotha. Once per battle at the end of your movement phase, the bearer can use this relic. If it does so, select one enemy unit within 6 inches of the bearer and roll 7d6s. For each 4 and 5, the unit suffers 1 mortal wound. For each 6, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Now this is a big Hail Mary one, huck this at someone, and yeah, you might get a few mortal wounds, but if you get double 6s or even triple 6s, that's 3d3 mortal wounds, 2d3, 3d3 mortal wounds on top of other ones. It's a one-off done and hit. Part of me would be like, yeah, I would have preferred it if it was maybe on, because it's only 7 dice. Yeah, make it, you can chuck out, and maybe on 3s or 2s you suffer mortal wounds, and then on 6s you suffer d3. It just means that if it's a one-off ability that you can't use again, make it count, make it hurt. And with a potential of 7 mortal wounds, well, actually a potential of 9 mortal wounds, if you manage to roll like so many 6s, then yeah, that might be possible. In fact, no, if it was 7 times d3, and if you manage to get all of them, oh, that's potential 21. That may sound overpowered, but you need to roll like 7 6s, so no. That may sound a bit overpowered, but the chance of that happening is unlikely, but it would be awesome. And it still can happen with this one. I just believe it should have been 2s or 3s. Demon's Toll, Nauseous Blightbringer only. Once per battle at the start of your opponent's movement phase, the bearer can use this relic. If it does so, select one enemy unit within 6 inches. Till the end of the phase, each time that unit is selected to fall back, roll 1d6. On a 2+, that unit cannot fall back and must remain stationary. Now I know there was, I think, a relic added in Psychic Awakening that gave your Poxwalkers a 5-up invul. I believe that's largely gone, which is tragic. This one simply limits your opponent from running away. Will it make the Nauseous Blightbringer better? Probably not. Fulgrim's Helm, add 3 inches to the range of bearer's aura abilities to a maximum of 12. Well, now you have the Contagion one. This one is actually now worth debating. It depends on the aura abilities that you do have, because there's other ones you can add on top of them. It really depends how you've upgraded them, obviously with your Contagion ability, etc, etc. If you've made, I think Magnus, Magnus, Dave's going to kill me on that one. I think lots of Death Guard people are as well. Mortarion, your Warlord, I don't think so many people are going to be too happy with this one, because he's going to take all those Contagion ability, like that Contagion ability, he's probably going to take that one from your army. He can't benefit from that one. You can maybe take an extra Warlord trait if you go a different Plague Company. This is now getting a bit complex without the book if you can't see it. I just think if you don't take Mortarion, this one's one to think about. If you do take Mortarion, it might be a bit more difficult to justify. Putrid Perispit, Malignant Plaguecaster or Terminator Sorcerer only. The bearer knows one additional psychic power from any discipline it has access to, and once per battle, after successfully manifesting a psychic power, the bearer can regain D3 mortal wounds. D3 wounds. I think it's okay, not the best. Having an additional psychic power is very useful. It just depends on your playstyle on that one. Tollkeeper, Tallyman model only. The bearer has the following ability. Tollkeeper, will a friendly Plague Company core unit within 6 inches of the bearer. Each time model in that unit makes a ranged attack, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. Now that's quite good. That is quite good. I think the Tallyman, I could be wrong, is one of the most improved units in this codex, just from its abilities changing. I think that one, if you're going to take a Tallyman with certain units, which you might do depending on your playstyle, if you're going to have a bit more backfield support, then yeah, if he was an HQ, he'd almost be my go-to choice for it. And then this one on top of it, just to give a bit more damage. It also doesn't affect just bolters, it is any of them, so that could be your blight launchers, your plasmid guns, etc, etc. So yeah, not bad, something to bear down in that one. It also can affect your Terminators if he's in range. So yeah, I actually really like that one a lot. Revolting Stench, Foul Black Spawn only. The bearer has the following ability, Revolting Stench Aura. While an enemy unit is within 6 inches of the bearer, the unit cannot make use of any rules that allow it to fight first and never counts having made a charge move this turn, irrespective of any abilities that unit may have. Interesting way to slow down people. It's already got an ability that does slow down people a wee bit. This just enhances it a wee bit. Suppurating Plates. The bearer has 2+ invul, 2+ save. Each time an enemy unit fights after it makes its attacks, if the bearer lost any wounds as a result of those attacks, roll 1d6 on a 2+, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So we went from the stop hitting yourself to stop hitting yourself once. It is pretty clear that, you know, it's after all the attacks have been done, you just roll 1 dice and a d6 and you can suffer a mortal wound. And you have to have lost a wound as well. Yeah, not so good. I'm not happy with that. That was my go-to Demon Prince one. It would protect me from hordes, and then it would sometimes bring a few mortal wounds back on. I think it's still not bad for Demon Prince, but largely it's not so useful. Plaguebringer, model equipped with Bale Sword, Demonic Plague Blade, Plague Knife or Plague Sword. The relic replaces a Bale Sword, Demon Plague Blade, Plague Knife or Plague Sword, and it's now called Plaguebringer. +2 strength, -3 AP and 2 damage, is a plague weapon. Each time model is destroyed as a result of this attack, that model counts as 2 destroyed models for the purpose of morale. Not bad, it's okay. Again, not the sort of melee weapon I want. So overall, what I think highlights to me is actually Tollkeeper for the Tallyman, and maybe that might be a wild one. Again, if he was an HQ choice, he'd be kind of one I'd maybe want to add along, because the HQ choices are limited. It's quite tragic he isn't. And then if you added in this relic, I'd be quite pleased. So that's the one that's really standing out to me. Lastly, we are going to go into the Contagion disciplines. So these are largely the same, apart from one key area, which I did mention earlier. Contagion discipline, Miasma of Pestilence. Blessing of Miasma of Pestilence has a warp charge of 6. If manifested, select one friendly Death Guard unit within 18 inches till the start of next psychic phase. Each attack on them against them, subtract 1 to the hit roll. Pretty much the same as before, 18 inches, -1 hit, what's not to love? Gift Contagion has changed a wee bit. Malediction has a warp charge of 5. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Till the start of your next sack phase, subtract 1 from the strength characteristic on the model, and if you get a result of 8 plus, really should be 7 plus because Nurgle, subtract 1 from the strength and attack characteristics. So you no longer have that random table, you don't know what the debuff is going to be, you know it's going to be -1 strength, there's potential of -1 attack as well. Makes it a bit more appealing because you know definitively it's going to be -1 strength. Not the best again, but still I think the certainty is a bit more of an improvement. Plague Wind, Witchfire. Plague Wind has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to the Psyker. Roll 1d6, and for each model in that unit, roll for each 6, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. If the result of the psych test is 9 or plus, they suffer 1 mortal wound for each roll of 5 plus. So a bit more of an improvement in this one to make it more appealing, because when it was just on 6s you'd suffer mortal wound, even if you're rolling this against a unit of 30, I think the average would be to score 5 mortal wounds? Yeah, 5 mortal wounds. Now it's the potential of doing 10 if you manage to get the 9 plus cast, but you never know, you might get a good roll as well. So input is good against hordes because it's each model in that unit, and really killing hordes is not a difficult thing. I just think unless it's like a big 10-man squad of Terminators or something, then yeah, maybe it's quite nice, but you don't see that too often, unless you're maybe facing Death Guard at the moment. Next we have Putrescent Vitality. Blessing is a warp charge of 7. If manifested, select one friendly Death Guard infantry within 18 inches of the Psyker. Till the start of your next sack phase, add 1 to strength and toughness characteristic of the unit. I believe that's pretty much the same as before. Curse the Leper is a Witchfire, warp charge of 6. If manifested, select the closest enemy unit that's within 18 inches and visible to the Psyker. Roll 76 for each dice result that exceeds that enemy unit's toughness characteristic. It suffers 1 mortal wound. Kind of same as before, but 1 less to cast. Whether it's worth it is debatable. Lastly is the new one, which is Gift of Plagues, is a blessing. This is replacing Blaze Purification. As warp charge value of 6, if manifested, select one friendly Death Guard unit within 18 inches of the Psyker until the start of the next phase. Add 6 to the range of Contagion abilities to a maximum of 12. Now, personally, I don't think that is worth exchanging for Blaze Purification. Blaze Purification was a great psychic ability, almost too good because I took it every time I played Death Guard. This is an okay psychic ability. You know, might be some cases you need to really put down Contagion abilities, but I just don't think it's a worthy successor to Blades of Putrefaction. I think a few people are going to be annoyed on that one. The next part would be Crusade rules. Now I'm going to skip them. That may annoy a few people and I'm sorry about that. I simply just not have played many of the Crusade games, etc. Large to things in the world, other things being in the way. I haven't had a chance to do so, so I don't think I can speak with it in any authority. There are things I could highlight, but I think best not to mention anything because I don't want to say anything that's wrong on that side. I simply don't think it's going to affect as many people because it's more narrative based. Hopefully, you know, you might see other things, and if you've got any questions, put in the comments and I will hands down do my best to reply to them to hopefully give you a better understanding of them. But now we are going to move on to data sheets, which maybe is the part that most people are excited about. Debatable in that one because a lot of the ways some stats have changed in some units and a lot of areas they have not. One thing I would say in terms of data sheets is that almost everything has gone up at least 1 attack. This to obviously make up for Hateful Assault. How it is in terms of point wise, I don't think it's affected it too much. Quite frankly, I think it's actually a benefit to just say you've got the extra attack over just having Hateful Assault, but gosh darn it, I would have loved to have both. So let's begin with the first unit, which is, and yes, I'm not going to do Mortarion, he's near the end, we're going to go with the Death Guard Demon Prince, which is the first one here. Points wise, 140 to 175 as base unit, then there's upgrades on top of it, 175 obviously being for wings. So what has changed here is gone from 4 attacks to 6 attacks, so there's a bit of an upgrade on that one. War gear changes, Plague Spear there, though just saying the Plague Spear, it's gone from 12 inches, it's now heavy D6, strength 5, etc. How you equip it is a little bit more different on that one. Essentially, I think it's if this model is equipped with a Hellforged sword, it can have a Plague Spear. If this model is equipped with a Plague Spear, if it's not equipped with a Plague Spear, then it can take a Hellforged sword. It can replace the Hellforged sword with a Demonic Axe or one Malefic Talon. Essentially, if you want to dual wield Malefic Talons. If this model is not equipped with Plague Spear, it can then choose to have Folded Wings. So you can't have the Spear and fly. You can only have the Spear if you have a Hellforged sword. So on that note, Malefic Talons can be used in a pair, but essentially when you use them as a pair, you only get one additional attack per one. So you get 2 additional attacks if you take them in a pair rather than 3. They are also now only -1 AP rather than -2, which is quite a heavy nerf when you look at the benefits of the other ones. So when we go to the Hellforged sword, it is now +1 strength, bringing you to that mighty strength 8, which is very, very nice. It is -3 AP and 3 damage. The Demonic Axe though is +2 strength, -2 AP and 3 damage. So you need to choose if you want to bring yourself to strength 9 rather than strength 8 and then having lower AP. But the best thing of all is neither of them have -1 to hit. That is exceptional, because it just means you're going to hit so much harder, and with 6 attacks base with a Malefic Talon as well. That is really nice. It's a shame that I made my Demon Prince to have 2 Malefic Talons. I would hands down probably go with a Demonic Axe. I'd prefer to be strength 9 and getting through toughness 8 stuff on 3s. If you then go the Plague Company, which, you need to forgive me, I need to actually go onto that page. The Plague Company, which is Mortarion's Anvil. Keep in mind that's the one I recommended. If you take Mortarion, have the Warlord trait so you can maybe stop overwatches and stop rerolls for your opponent. But you can give the Relic then to the Demon Prince, I believe, and this will give him reroll hits and wounds, because obviously his rule has changed, where Lord of the Death Guard, while a friendly Plague Marine Company core units within 6 inches, each time model makes attack, they reroll hit rolls of 1. So he doesn't benefit from it anymore. So that makes him a prime candidate for that relic. Now, I could have missed the section that says you can't take it. I'm very wary of that, but I don't think there is. Next up, we are going to go to Typhus. So Typhus has +1 movement and +1 attack on 2 stats, bringing him to attack 6. War gear changes, Mastercraft and Man Reaper, more or less all the same, but it does have -1 to hit, which when it uses its cleave ability, the cleave being +3 strength, -3 AP, 3 damage. That seems sort of odd. I'm asking myself why, if Typhus is meant to be this, absolute monster, should have given him the ability to just wield it normally like he used to. It does have a scything ability though, which is +1, it can then do +1 strength, -1 AP, 1 damage, and if he does the scything ability, he makes 2 hit rolls instead of 1, essentially give him 12 attacks when in scything, which is really quite potentially very dangerous. And at strength 5, that would be quite nice. He has Disgustingly Resilient, Contagious, Teleport Strike, 4-up Inbull. The Destroyer Hive weapon is gone. This is now replaced with a different ability that is, in your command phase, you can select one enemy unit within 6 inches of this model, roll 1d6 on a 2+, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Instead of having that ranged weapon, it's just a bit more throwing out mortal wounds. Maybe a bit of a nerf in some people's eyes, maybe a bit of a benefit just because I had huge amounts of -AP on it. Yeah, largely okay on that one, I can sort of forgive. Master of the Dead Who Walk, or ability, while friendly poxwalk units within 6 inches of this model, each time a model to that unit makes an attack, add 1 to strength characteristic of that attack. Used to be strength and toughness, but they've naturally gone up to toughness 4, so I can accept that one. Lord of the Death Guard is the same as before, 6-inch aura that allows core units to reroll hit rolls of 1. Vector of Diseases, add 3 to Contagion range of all Contagion abilities up to 12 inches. Herald of Death Guard, this model can be included in any Death Guard detachment without preventing other units in detachment from carrying a Plague Company Contagion. This model can carry a Plague Company Contagion if it is Harbinger detachment. So just to make it a little bit easier for you in your detachments if you take them otherwise. We then have our Death Guard Chaos Lord is now toughness 5, which kind of makes sense. 5 attacks. It does have Malicious Volley, Disgustingly Resilient now. I believe it did not have Disgustingly Resilient before. Sigil Corruption, generally all kind of the same except for Astartes Chainsword, which is -1 AP. Largely just the same. When it comes to Death Guard Chaos Lord, again, toughness 5. Oh yeah, the attacks of each went up to 5. I think that's because Hateful Assault was gone. If I don't mention something went up by attack, it probably went up by an attack. As I said, War Gear is largely the same. Obviously you've got the, when you Lord of Death Guard, Plague Company core unit within 6 inches, reroll hit rolls of 1. Fine. We then have the Lord of Virulence. Let's speak on this one. So I should mention points actually. Typhus is 165, Death Guard Chaos Lord is 85, and Death Guard Terminator Lord is 105. Lord of Virulence is 120 points. What does he do? He is Movement 5, Weapon Skill, Bliss Skill 2, Strength 4, Toughness 5, 6 wounds, 5 attacks, Leadership 9, 2+ save. Largely I believe the exact same as a Death Guard Chaos Lord and Terminator armour. He is armed with just one Twin Plague Spear, Plague Claw, Blight Grenades and Crack Grenades. Twin Plague Spear we've seen is 12 inches, heavy 2d6, strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage. Each time automatically hits and it's a plague weapon. And the Plague Claw is ×2 strength, -3 AP, 2 damage. Plague weapon, each time attacks made with this, subtract 1 to it. I think it's basically a Power Fist with Plague, which is quite nice. Now its abilities are Disgusting Resilient, Contagious Nurgle, Teleport Strike. It has Disease Terminator armour, not Cataphractii armour, bit odd. This model has a 4+ invul save. Lord of the Death Guard rule, which is your Plague Company core unit within 6 inches. Each time a model in that unit makes a reroll hit roll of 1 if they're a core unit. And then of course we've all seen the Master Destruction aura. While a friendly Plague Company core unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time model in that unit makes a ranged attack with a plague weapon on an unmodified wound roll of 6, improve the armour penetration characteristic of the attack by 1. Missed opportunity indeed. Maybe there might be combinations people can think of in this one, but ultimately I don't see why on this one. It buffs core units when it was saying it was meant to be artillery. Very big missed opportunity. If there was anything else to say in this one, I think there's going to be a lot of angry Death Guard players. Are they worth the extra 15 points over Chaos Lords and Terminator armour? Arguably no. I think the only main difference is that Twin Plague Spear might be a bit more handy and the model looks awesome. The Master of Destruction one is just not well thought out. There may be a combination I am totally missing and go, wow, that might be good. Maybe you could argue it with, you know, Blightlord Terminators and the rapid firing, then yeah, Teleport Strike in with them and you're going to add -1 whenever they score an unmodified roll of 6. But and only when you then spend a stratagem to make like their bolters plague weapons. It's kind of like, for a character that should have been different, I feel it is a massive wasted opportunity. It should have been, I don't know, it should have been something that allowed the artillery to maybe reroll the amount of random shots they get. That might be really good for Plagueburst Crawlers. Maybe it should have allowed reroll hit ones to anything that is a demonic vehicle. That might be a little bit too good. I know they don't want to do that anymore. But basically this should have taken on the role of what Lord Discordant was. It's supposed to help vehicles or something that's artillery. We don't have any infantry artillery, so it should have been vehicles. Nope, it's helping core. Very odd choice in this one, but there might be something I'm missing. I don't think I am though. Lord of Contagion, +1 movement, +1 attack. Man Reaper is now Cleave and Scythe abilities. 2 damage, not D3, it is Plague, and it also has -1 to hit, which I don't believe it had before. The Scythe ability is +1 strength, -1 AP, 1 damage, and it makes 2 attacks instead of 2 attacks per attack. Essentially at 5 attacks you're getting 10 attacks. The Plague Reaper, however, is ×2 strength but -1 to hit, and it is ×2 strength, -3, 3 damage. If you do have the Plague Reaper, you can take an Orb of Dissection, which is 6-inch grenade, 3d3, strength 4, -1, 2 damage. It is a blast weapon and can only be used once. It is also Plague. As for combats, so just saying this one, it has also got Disgusting Resilient, Contagion, Nurgle, Teleport Strike, Vector of Disease, add 3 to Contagion range of all Contagion abilities for this unit. 4 up invul because it's got disease terminator armor. Oh, they got rid. I didn't realise this before. They must have got rid of the term cataphrachy armor. It is now just called disease terminator armor. It is indeed. That might annoy a few people, to be honest. And then it has Lord of the Death Guard aura. While a friendly plague company core units within 6 inches, you reroll 1s to hit. Honestly, I think this is a better one. It is 120 points as well. There might be a few upgrade points differences as well. I'd honestly take it as a Plague Reaper, maybe an Orb of Dissection, depending on the points, because it does make you Strength 8, -3 and 3 damage. Yeah, there's that -1 to hit, but you're still going to hit like an absolute brick and really cause quite a bit of damage. So that I could see, plus the Lord of Contagion is one of my favourite models. I've never used it before. I would probably use, I believe that the one you get in the box is a Man Reaper it's actually got, not a Plague Reaper. Honestly, I don't think anyone would really fight me on this one if I said this is a Plague Reaper instead. Some might, but the model is just too cool not to use. Now, this is the important thing to mention, that when every unit I've mentioned there has, as far as I can see, the Lord of Death Guard's rule. That means you can only use 1 in a detachment. That is a problem. That is a real problem. I usually would take 2 of these, but now you can't. So to complete your battalion, you must either take a Death Guard Sorcerer and Terminator Armor, or a Malignant Plaguecaster, and I am not happy with that. Just to mention, Malignant Plaguecaster, +1 attack, the Corrupted Staff is +1 strength and a Plague Weapon. Pestilent Fallout, largely the same, but a 12-inch ability, which is significantly better, but largely the same. And then the Death Guard Sorcerer and Terminator Armor, the Malignant Plaguecaster is 95 points, Sorcerer and Terminator Armor is 110 points, +1 toughness, +1 attack, Force Stave is +3 strength, but otherwise largely the same. Next up we come to Plague Marines, and once again their datasheet takes up a massive page. So they are 21 points, and most of their upgrades are about the 10-point range. They are of course now 2 wounds and 2 attacks basic. Their war gear, crikey, this is a bit of a mess. If the datasheet is up on screen, which it should be, you should have a wee read of it. Blight Launcher now is a solid 2 damage, not D3. Honestly, I actually prefer that. I just think I hate rolling the 1s. Having the solid 2 means you're going to be a much more bigger threat to a lot of Loyalist Marines. Flamer weapons are largely now all 12 inches. Again, fantastic. Going to be interesting to see how that affects Deep Strike armies with a bunch of flamers. And Robotic Axe is +1 strength, +1 strength. I think before it was +2 strength, could be wrong on that. Flail of Corruption is now -1 strength from what it was before. Not -1 strength natively, it used to be I think +2 strength, it's now +1 strength. It's -2 AP, 2 damage. It's a Plague Weapon, and each time you make an attack with it, it's make 2 hit rolls instead of 1. So essentially you double your attacks, not D3. Yes, it's lost a bit of the unique side to it, but honestly I can sort of accept it. I wish it was the same, because I think it was actually significantly better, but it is what it is on that one. I think it was one of those solid units that now that you've got 2 attacks natively, potentially 3 with a rule, I can sort of understand it maybe getting a little bit nerfed down. Demonic Plague Blades, I think that's largely a power. No, it's not, it's just their Plague. I think that's for the champion. It is +1 strength, -1 AP, 1 damage, Plague Weapon. And then you have your obvious Power Fist. I kind of wish it was the same worded attack as the Lord of Virulence, which was the Plague Claw, and then made the Power Fist actually a Plague Weapon. That would have been really cool, but that is not the case. We do have 2 icons. One has been added. I think it is quite useful. Icon of Despair. In your morale phase, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer. Bearer's unit. On a 4+, the enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wounds. Not really worth it. Signal of Decay, though, is each time an attack is made with a bolt weapon by a module in the target unit, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target. That is a lot better, so this makes them a little bit more of an interesting one to have with the with the other abilities you've got, such as the +1 to wound, and then obviously you've got, I think there's one that's -1 AP. But the funny thing is, with the Lord of Virulence, its ability only affects when they wound. So if you have that ability on top and you have a 6 automatically hits, and hits and then wounds automatically, I believe they made it so that it doesn't count as a 6 on the wound roll, it just counts as actually wounding, just because there was an Imperial Fist conundrum where they made infinite shots. If they managed to get a 6 to hit, they had an ability to make infinity shots. So they said, no, that doesn't count anymore. I just think that Lord of Virulence, you go, oh, this upgrade for Plague Marines, which he should have been geared for, we're going to give them a 10-point upgrade that kind of nullifies them in a way. Yeah, take what you will on that one. In the loadout, a slight nerf, so you can't take 2 special weapons in a 5-man squad. Largely, you've got your Plague Marine Champions that has a whole bunch of upgrades. One Plague Marine Bolt Gun can be replaced with a Blight Launcher, one Plague Marine Bolt Gun can be replaced with a Blight Spear. If the unit contains 10 models, one additional Plague Marine's Bolter can be replaced with following, Blight Launcher or Blight Spear. For every 5-man model in the unit, the Bolter can be replaced with either a Melta Gun, Plague Belcher or Plasma Gun. For every 5-man unit, then it goes on to like a whole bunch of like 5 models in the squads can replace with one, either the bolter with a Plague Knife or a bubonic Axe, or the next line down, a Mace Contagion and a bubonic Axe, Flail of Corruption or Great Plague Cleaver. One Plague Marine that's equipped with the Bolt Gun can take the Icon of Despair, and also one with the Bolt Gun can take a Sigil of Decay. They have Malicious Volley, Remorseless, Disgustingly Resilient, and Contagions of Nurgle. They also have Vector's Death, and a Plague Marine equipped with 2 melee Plague weapons has an attack characteristics of 3. Oh boy, right, okie dokie. So, the main thing to mention in that one is that they have limited to, the ways in which you sort of equip yourself. You can't take a 5-man squad and then take 2 special weapons, then maybe take a special weapon on your champion. So you wanted like 3 plasma guns. That's kind of gone, but there is still ways to get a bunch of special weapons. I think now it's down to you can take like a Blight Launcher and then a plasma gun, then a Plague Spear. So it's not bad on that side. The thing that intrigues me most is that the fact that if you take 2 melee Plague weapons, you have an attack characteristic of 3. Now, why is that interesting is that every single one of them has a Plague Knife, and you're replacing your Bolt Gun with either one of the upgrades. So if you take any of the upgrades, which you can fill out the unit with all these different upgrades, basically for every 5-man squads, you can replace one with a Plague Knife, then another one is in our 5-man squad with a Boric Axe, another one, etc, etc, etc. Yeah, you're adding one to the attack automatically if you make these. So a Flail of Corruption, you have a Flail of Corruption and you still keep your Plague Knife. That means your Flail of Corruption is getting 3 attacks, or more notably, 6 attacks. That makes it very tempting. I'm very intrigued to see what Combat Death Guard might look like. But obviously the Bolter ones are still not bad, but I am edging to what can be done with combat. We're then going to go into Death Guard Cultists, and just say Plague Marines, think I said it for 21 points. Death Guard Cultists, 5 points, largely unchanged. Poxwalkers are 5 points. They are hitting on 4s now all the time. I don't think they need to be above a unit size. They are toughness 4, which is very nice. Big improvements in stats, keeps them quite nice. They have Curse of the Walking Pox, which is each time melee attack from this unit kills an enemy model that is not a vehicle or monster. You can put a destroyed model from this unit back up with 1 wound remaining. Pretty cool. Mindless Horde, they cannot perform actions, which might hurt you in some way, but they can do Spread the Sickness, which is quite good. And in Crusade armies, it basically can't get any experience. Fodder won't suffer morale, and then Unending Horde, that it does have the ignore wound rolls on a 6. So you do have it on those units, and that's pretty much all it is, other than one unit that does give that ability. But yeah, people are asking, oh, Disgusting Resilience is not going to help Poxwalkers. They don't have it. They just have the rule for ignoring wounds in 6s. I kind of wish it was still 5s. Nauseous Blightbringer, +1 attack, of course. Poxwalkers are still 2 attacks, but Nauseous Blightbringer is +1 attack. Cursed Plague Bell is now at -1 AP. I don't think I had a minus before. Sickening Vitality is changed to basically add 1 to movements to units in an aura ability, and I think it's only core units and Photed Viron units that add that. It's not that great. Toxin of Misery is a 6-inch aura that affects combat attrition, and then Infric Malaise, a 6-inch aura that affects psychic. All in, very much not sold. Maybe if you're facing Taz and Sons, Grey Knights or Demons, that might, having that -1 psychic test, but it's only a 6-inch aura. If it was like a 12 or 18-inch, yep, I would say that's kind of got to be something to think about. At 60 points, I mean, kind of okay. If he was actually an HQ choice, might have considered it over Sorcerer, but nope, that is an elite choice. Foul Blightspawn, I think this was something that everyone really liked, bar me. I wasn't too sold on this guy, and many people came into trouble for it. 75 points now. He has 1 extra attack, because he's now at 4 attacks. His sprayer is 12 inches now, assault d6, strength 7, minus 3 AP and 2 damage. 7 damage may make it less risk, but it does mean against infantry it's going to be quite nice. And the damage being 2 is a bit solid, but okay. The Unholy Death Head is 6 inches, grenade, 2d6, strength 5, minus 1, 1 damage. And it's blast weapon, plague weapon, and can only be used once. It also has, at the start of the fight phase, you can select one enemy unit within 3 inches of this model. That unit is not eligible to fight this phase until all eligible units from your army have done so. So that makes me sort of question the other upgrades, the relic for him, that does slow down people that have always strike first. I suppose it cancels that out in case they do have that ability. It's a bit of an odd one in that one. I would need to check on that. Largely again, I'm not too sold on this guy, but people do like him. I would need to try him out. He's only got 1d6. If he was maybe the 2d6er, I'd be very, very tempted. Biologus Putrefier, which is 65 points, plus 1 attack. Weapons largely unaffected. Used to be, his injector pistol is, is now 3-inch, pistol 1, strength 4, AP minus 1, 1 damage. Plague weapon, but if it's made against an infantry, cavalry or beast model and successfully wounds, it inflicts d3 wounds instead of in additional to normal damage. Now it used to be d6 damage except against vehicles it was 1, so it's kind of a nerf, but it is also mortal wounds. Largely I'm kind of like, yeah, I can accept it in a way, but he was never using that pistol for the best of things anyway. His Hyper Blight Grenade no longer has the mortal wound rule, but is -1. I'll read it here. It's Hyper Blight Grenade, 6 inches, grenade d6, strength 4, -1, 2 damage, blast, plague weapon. So a bit of a heavy nerf on that one. Disgusting Result, Contagion of Nurgle. His abilities are Blight Racks, Aura. While friendly bubonic Astartes units within 6 inches of this model, Blight Grenade models in that unit are equipped with have an armor characteristic of -1 and a damage of 2. Putridly explodes when the model is destroyed. Roll a d6 and a 4+. Each unit, excluding Nurgle, suffers 1 mortal wounds. And then a lot of people might be going, oh wow, that's really not good. That really nerfs this guy quite a lot. It does have another rule here, Foul Infusion. Once per turn, at the start of either of your charge phase or fight phase, you can select one friendly Plague Company core unit within 6 inches of this model. Until the start of your next command phase, each time model in that unit makes a melee attack with a plague weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts a mortal wound on the target in addition to normal damage. Each unit can only be selected for this ability once per turn. So that's an interesting side of that one, is that he's gone from hucking grenades to maybe helping melee units quite a wee bit, especially if they're armed with a bunch of plague weapons. Very interesting to have him go into a rhino with a bunch of plague marines, hop them out with all their plague weapons and start hacking people apart. And then on unmodified, I think it was it, unmodified wound rolls of 6 as a mortal wound to a target in addition to damage. Might be something very interesting to go on there. So he may have lost his previous uses and replaced it with something different, and I'm intrigued to try. Tallyman, 70 points, plus 1 attack, of course. No real combat weapons to use, that's not what he's about. Previously favouring combat rerolls, so I'll go into his rules here. He's got malicious calculations. In your command phase, this model can tally for one friendly Plague Company core unit within 6 inches of it until the start of your next command phase. Each time model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to that attack's hit roll. Each unit can only be tallied for once per turn. So important side to say in that one is that you activate that in the command phase, and each time he's essentially given that unit a +1 attack. That means that if they're a core unit, which they will be, and they're affected by a reroll from a Lord, it's going to make them highly accurate. And you can do that on Blight Lords, you can do that on Plague Marines. Very interesting. I think that instead of having the rerolls to hit in combat, this affects in ranged as well. So I'm very interested to try him. But then his 7-fold chant is also improved as well. At the start of command phase, if this model's on the battlefield, roll a 2d6, and on a 7 you just gain a command point. I know in the past you had to roll a 7 exactly. Far too unlikely, people didn't want it. Making a 70-point model, having a chance to bring you back some command points, and then also adding +1 to it as his aura ability, not aura ability, his ranged ability, actually makes him very, very tempting. Plague Surgeon is up by an attack, which is fine, 75 points, plus attack, and Bale Swords are +1 strength. Largely unchanged. His abilities have changed though, his stats haven't. At the end of your movement phase, this model can heal 1 friendly bubonic Astartes infantry model within 3 inches. The model regains up to D3 lost wounds. Each model can only be healed once per turn. Tainted Athema Aura, when a friendly bubonic Astartes infantry unit within 3 inches of this model takes a wound, they could ignore on a 6. There's your 6-up ignore, but he needs to be nearby. It's one of my favourite models in the game, so it's very, very annoying not to feel him so much. I feel if you are going to maybe play Blight Lords or Death Shrouds and not deep strike him, he would be a very worthy addition. Maybe with Plague Marines, because he does offer that 6-up ignore, which I don't really rate, but also if one doesn't die, you can maybe move one up a wounds, maybe even heal up a Terminator if he's nearby them. I think he's a bit trickier to use, but something to definitely think about. Blight Lord Terminators. Blight Lord Terminators are +1 movement up to 5, +1 wounds up to 3 wounds, and +1 attack. Honestly, excellent. Weapons changed again, largely to fit the box set. The weapons has loadout, largely to fit the box set for the Blight Lords, and I don't think that's maybe for the better. For every 5 models, a combi bolter can be replaced by a combi flamer. Every 5 models can be replaced by melta. Every 5 models can be replaced by plasma. Now I made 10 of them with combi bolters and 10 of them with plasma. There is next no chance I'll be able to use all those plasma again, really nullifying a lot of my guys in that one. So I'm going to have to now think about bringing on combi plasma or something. Maybe I have to try and hack apart some of those plasma. Very, very annoying in some ways. So I'm not too pleased with that one. Otherwise, it did lose its half the advanced rule, and it did lose Aura of Rust, which I can kind of accept. Overall, they're still rocking their 4-up invul, which is really, really nice. They are 40 points in model, and each one of their upgrades is 5 points. They are tough with Disgusting Resilient. They have loads of wounds. They are 2-up save, 4-up invul. Yeah, I can see these guys doing pretty darn well. So very interested to see how Blight Lord Terminators do in the future. Next up we come to Death Shrouds, who are 50 points a model, and a few upgrades they can do here. They are movement 5, +1 to it, so they're now hitting on 2s, but don't get too excited. Hitting on 3s, bliss skill, but we don't worry about that. They are 3 wounds, and they are now 4 attacks, with champion being 5. I should say the champion, the Plague Lord Terminators, he's still only 3, but I think that was the same as before. But still, Death Shrouds with 4 attacks and 5 for the champion is deadly. Their gauntlet is range 12, pistol d6, strength 3, AP 0, 1 damage, and then the usual things of plague weapon, auto hitting. Band Reapers, so of course they are +3 strength, -3 AP and 2 damage, plague weapon, but they now -1 to hit. Now, this is why they got +1 to hit, because if they gave them the -1 to hit, they'd then be hitting on 4s, so they're now actually back up to hitting on 3s. I don't think they hit on 2s previously. They're now hitting at 2s again, but now your opponent can't try and debuff them, because they can, but the maximum they'll get is 3s to hit. So in a way, having that +1 to their stat and then just the -1 is better. Sure, I'd prefer they didn't have -1 to ever hit, but I can largely accept it. They do have the Scythe ability as well, which means each attack they do counts as 2 attacks when they choose the Scythe profile, which is +1 strength, -1 AP, 1 damage, but that means that a basic guy's putting out 8 attacks and the champion putting out 10. That is terrifying. You bring them in and they are going to scare some units, and of course they are tough as nails. They've got Chimes Contagion, which is something you can give them as a upgrade. Chimes Contagion adds 3 to Contagion range of all Contagion abilities. Mediocre at best. They have Remorseless, Disgusting Resilient, Contagion Miracle, Teleport Strike, 4-up invul due to their armour, and they have the Bodyguard ability, which has changed. Now the Bodyguard ability has gone from what it was before to something that's a bit odd. While a friendly Plague Company character unit with a wounds characteristic of a 9 or less is within 3 inches of this unit, enemy models cannot target that character with ranged attacks, essentially protecting them from snipers, but it means they never protect Mortarion, which doesn't make sense to me. These guys were Mortarion's bodyguards. Apparently he never took more than 7 steps away from a Death Shroud at any one time back in the day. Maybe he's just got sick of them and he's floated away in some way, but it just seems a bit odd for me. They should have been able to protect Mortarion for a bit longer, if you ask me. Hellbrute. Hellbrute has gone up to 5 attacks. It is 115 points, which may be a little bit expensive, depending, because I presume with a couple of its weapons are going to be built in. Hellbrute has Plasma Cannon, is +1 damage, up to 3 damage now. Autocannon, the Reaper Autocannon, is it Reaper Autocannon? Just general Autocannon. He says Reaper Autocannon, yes, is a -2 AP, and then obviously Heavy Bolter is 2 damage. Power Scourge is now a little bit nerfed, it is only +1 strength, bringing you to strength 7, not strength 8, which is okay, but strength 8 really made it the go-to weapon, so having that go down slightly makes the other weapons such as the Hellbrute Fist and the Hellbrute Hammer look a lot more appealing. Bit of a shame, it still gives you 3 extra attacks, but having that strength 8 really made it stand out a little bit too much. I suppose in terms of balancing, it is a good thing. It does not have Disgusting Resilient, but it does have a natural Monstrous Resilient, which is -1 to damage characteristic, and it does have Frenzy, which has been much better for Hellbrutes. Each time this model makes an attack, if it has 7 or fewer wounds remaining, reroll wound rolls of 1. Obviously that's 8 wounds, so if it takes 1 wound it essentially becomes frenzied and you're going to get reroll wound rolls of 1. Excellent. It is a core unit, so you do get other benefits as well, and then it explodes. Death Guard Possessed have gone up a toughness, and they now have 4 attacks base, which great, it's no longer random, and it's even more. They do have Plague Weapons, which is good, and they do have Disgustingly Resilient and Remorseless. However, they do have one thing that is a problem, and I'll get into that later. You'll see that in the transport side, but mainly they are improved quite a wee bit. At 24 points a model, will that sell them though? I am not entirely sure. Chaos Spawn now have 2d3 attacks instead of d6, huge improvement, because d6 sometimes you meant you get 1, sometimes you get 6, 2d3 means you're guaranteed at least 2. Special ability table is largely the same, except for 2 extra attacks. It is now 3d3 attacks instead of 2d3 attacks. They do not have Disgustingly Resilient, but I believe there is a stratagem to give it to them, depending on the points. It may be worth it, maybe not. Mythic Blight Hauler. Now this was the little engine that could. It was Shining Star 9th edition, but it has recently gone up to 140 points, which is quite a whopping 40 point increase. It is now hitting on 3s, which is pretty darn good. Its Bile Spurt is a blast weapon. I don't know if it was before, but okay. Multi-Melta, we should know the changes by now, which is really good, and Gnashing Maw largely the same. Its special abilities have changed. It is Remorseless, Disgusting Resilient, and Contagions of Nurgle, which is fine. Each time model in this unit is destroyed, roll 1d6 before removing it from play. On a 4+, explodes and causes mortal wounds. It has a 5-up invul, and it has Foul Stench. Each time a melee attack is made against this unit, subtract 1 from the attack's hit roll. So Putrescent Fog is gone. Kinda accept that, because it was never about buffing units. I get the thought process, but it was just out moving them significantly. Trilobe is gone because you're already hit on 3s. Tritract is gone because we're obviously now stable, we don't need the heavy stuff. Yeah, are these guys worth 140 points per one? Time will tell, but they are now a vastly improved unit. Photo Blow Drones have gone to 130 points. They are maximum now of 140 points. The one Shining Drone has actually, in a way, improved a bit. Firstly, it's dropped to 9 wounds from 10. Seems odd, but this means that its stats no longer deteriorate, which is actually a big advantage, which I can accept when it comes to this case that you're no longer going to be having your stats deteriorate for just 1 wound. In fact, you're now hitting on 3s, which is a huge advantage. You're always moving on 10s, you're always going to be strength 6, and you always have 4 attacks. This makes it a far more tempting option for all its loadouts. Plague Spitter is now just a straightforward strength 6, which is nice, and a good horde clearer. However, Heavy Blight Launcher is sort of tempting now that it's straight 2 damage instead of D3, and it obviously puts out 6 shots, so hit on 3s, actually a wee bit of thought there. However, the Fleshmoor may be the most tempting of them all. You know, it's now 3+ to hit, and now offers you an additional 3 attacks whenever you use it, but because it's already at 4, that means you're going to get 7 attacks. Now I know beforehand you could get a stupid amount of attacks, but now 7 attacks feels good to me. I I really think that's quite good. No, sorry, I absolutely mistake myself here. It's not an additional 3 attacks. You make 3 hit rolls instead of 1. This gives a drone a whopping 12 attacks. 12 attacks when you use a drone. Actually, I think that's a huge improvement. So I'm really interested in taking more floated bloat drones of flesh mowers. 12 attacks per one. When they're hitting their strength 7, -2 and 2 damage, they will rip through other marines like there's no tomorrow. So very tempted to give that one a try. Plagueburst Crawler, stat wise, largely the same. There is now hitting on 3s, then deteriorates to 4s and 5s. Has an extra attack, which I don't really care. It was never about doing an attack in combat. Entropy Cannon, largely improved. It is now D3 plus 3 damage. Plague weapons, and you cannot shut these down as easily. Obviously due to the vehicle rules and heavy weapon firing. Makes them tempting as a backfield unit rather than being a bully up unit. Probably the mortar can't fire if it's tied in combat, though there is a stratagem under one of the plague companies that can get around it. But just making it more accurate, more reliable, does make it a very tempting backfield unit. Stick on objectives, see what happens. First time I'm saying, I'm tempted to take it over the Plague Spitters, but we'll have to see. Also, the Rot Hole Volley Gun is moved from being, I think it was Heavy 3 before, it's now Rapid Fire 3. Very odd change in that one, but okay. Chaos Land Raider, largely unchanged, 285 points. Smoke launchers have changed to a sort of stratagem now, which is a bit of a shame, but okay. Now, the point I've said on Possessed is that it says here on this datasheet that Terminators and Possessed take up 2 models. So you can guess what's going to happen to Possessed when it comes to Rhinos. Hint, you're not going to be able to put them into Rhinos. Chaos Predator, Annihilator, Destructor, 130 points and 140 points. You know what? Largely the same, minus the smoke launcher stuff. Defiler, the iconic Defiler, whether you love it or hate it, it has changed. Its movement, weapon skill, bliss skill, deterioration is now, in terms of like its hitting, is now 3, 4s and 5s, but its attacks always sit on is now always 5. I think previously its ballistic skill never changed. Now it's its weapon skill and ballistic skill, and they go from 3, 4 and 5. As for changes, Defiler Cannon is now straight 3 damage. Wonder what that will mean for other battle cannons, but it's been renamed to Defiler Cannon, so maybe it's only Defiler that will be moved to 3 damage. Reaper Auto is now -2 AP. Defiler Scourge is now only 2 damage, not 3, and again smoke launchers, largely unchanged in that one. Rhino, largely the same, but cannot be self-repaired and does have Contagion, which is nice. It also cannot transport Possessed, which is not nice. Does not affect my Death Guard, but it may affect my Chaos Space Marines when it comes to it, because I used to shove them into Rhinos all the time. Now we get to Mortarion. So here we go. We've seen his stats and everything. We've probably seen his data sheet already, so it's more me trying to clarify and give my unit. He is a price tag of 490. Whether he's worth that or not is largely, we'll have to see in that. Deterioration happens at 10 wounds, 6 wounds. Happens at 10 wounds, and then 10 wounds is at max, 6 is at middle, and 5. So his deterioration table has actually got slightly worse in terms of how many wounds you're at. He deteriorates a little bit quicker, which is not ideal. His lantern went down from, I think it was 18 inches to 12 inches. Silence largely the same, but it's now got a whopping D3 plus 3 damage, which is amazing. Really, really good. It makes him quite reliable and able to throw out damage, which is quite nice. Now the messy part. In terms of rerolls, you've got your Chapter Master rule, the Primarch of the Demon Death Guard. In your command phase, select one friendly Death Guard core or Death Guard's character within 6 inches of the model until the start of your next command phase. You can each time a model in that unit makes attack, you can reroll a hit roll. And then he's also got, while a friendly Death Guard core unit within 6 inches, each time a model in that unit makes attack, reroll hit roll of 1. He is the Demon Primarch, so if your army is Battleforged, he must be your Warlord. If more than one model in your army has a rule to this effect, then one of these models must be your Warlord. I mean, because he gets 3 Warlord traits plus 1, he's probably going to always be your Warlord, to be honest. The Barber's Plate gives him a 3-up invul. I would have killed for that to be a 3-up invul. It may have been too much to ask. I know they try and avoid 3-up invuls. Gonna not give him Storm Shields. But man, if that was 3-up invul. Ho 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 ho. He does have Disgust and Resilient Contagions. He is the host of Plagues. At the start of the first battle round, select one of the following Warlord traits: Chamber Lot, Ferric Blight, Glooming Bloat, Eater Plague, Sanguinous Flux, the Droning, Nuggles Fruit. You cannot select a Warlord trait that another model in your army already has until the end of the battle. That model gains a selected Warlord trait in addition to any it has, even if it is not your Warlord. So the one I recommended, I think, for him was the shut off the Overwatch and also other people's abilities. I thought that was quite good for him. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head. He's got Putrid Explosion, which on a 4+, when he dies, everything within 6 inches that isn't Nurgle suffers D3 mortal wounds. Toxic Presence, the model counts the battle round numbers being 4 for the purpose of determining the contagion range of the contagion abilities it has. And that's largely Mortarion, bar going up to toughness 8, which it was a mistake he wasn't toughness 8 already. Having the 5-up ignore from one of his Warlord traits and then the various other buffs is quite useful. I believe he does, from the Arch Contaminator, he gets to reroll his wounds, which is nice. He doesn't get to reroll his hits. I suppose he could choose himself for rerolling all hits due to being a Death Guard character, for being the Primarch of the Death Guard. Yeah, overall I do like him. Whether he's worth the 490, it's kind of a difficult one to say on that one. Can he take the Nightbringer? The problem with the Nightbringer is that you've got to take him out quick, and yet he could take him out in one go if the Lantern managed to cause 3 wounds, his psychic abilities managed to do 3 wounds, and then his attacks did 3 wounds, that being the easiest one of course. But otherwise it would take 4 turns, and the problem with the Nightbringer is that the Nightbringer has like -4 AP and ignores invuls automatically. I think ignores invuls. Given enough chances and it does d6 damage, probably could take Mortarion no problem. I mean, I'd say Nightbringer could probably take most characters no problem. It would only probably need 1 if not 2 turns. Mortarion, I think, unless he gets it in one go, is probably going to need 2 turns, maybe 3. It's a bit of a tricky one. 490, he is Psyker as well, so he does have his 2 psychic abilities to cast, 3 to deny, and he does know 3 from Contagion. He knows Smite and 3 Contagion. 490, I can see him being dropped down to maybe 450, and then we can talk. But overall, I do like him, just maybe that little bit expensive, or maybe people will go, absolutely not. He is rocking 7 attacks. I think previously he was 6, it's now 7. Miasmic Malefier, which is obviously your new, not battalion, fortification model, 75 points. All in, it still is a bit of an odd, they're really struggling with terrain pieces when it comes to 40k. Counts the Contagion rule as being turn 4, so that means 9 inch around it, which can be a pain for your opponent. You can also give a Death Guard infantry unit wholly within 6 inches of it in light cover. If only we had, and I'm pretty sure they're infantry, obliterators. I would have this. 2 obliterator units, backfield on objective, lovely. I'd be delighted. Even Havocs, really, really nice. They gave this unit so units within it get light cover, but to an army that doesn't have any real backfield units that would really warrant this. If you give us those backfield units, you will sell a lot more of these. So that's it for Death Guards. I'll probably do another couple of videos on them, just saying what do I think people should begin with, what people should be using, maybe an update on when people get their hands on it. People make absolutely bonkers combinations, because it will happen. How do I feel about it? I feel it's a very balanced codex. A lot of the things that you used before have changed, whether for the better or the worse is debatable. Your demon engines, which a lot of people used, are going to be better than before, I feel. The Lord of Virulence, a lot of people are going to be annoyed about, and justifiably so. They marketed it in a really strange way because of a stratagem. That's odd to me. That seems really, really odd. Mortarion, take away a few points. I'm going to be absolutely happy with that. I think he's still an absolute beast. Every time I've used him, he's been an absolute joy. Some of the Lord of Chaos, Lord of Death Guard rule, please take away from Demon Princes, and I can largely accept it. Maybe a way to make some of the elite choices HQ choices would be quite nice as well, and I would be a little bit more delighted. but ultimately I feel that the army is much more spread ranged, in that I think Plague Marines, Blight Lords and Death Shrouds going to be interesting how they work. I think Plague Marines as a combat unit may work out really, really well. I think Death Shrouds as a combat unit may work out really, really well. I think Blight Lords as a sort of tough, very ranged unit is going to work out really, really well. It's really going to depend on what people do, and I'm excited to see so. That is it for Death Guards. Really want to hear what people think. Shove some comments down there. I'll try and respond to them ASAP over the weekend this comes out. But that's kind of it. Check us out on social media where you can see upcoming projects where we are doing some stuff. And you can check us out on Patreon, help support channel, bring you more content because we absolutely love doing so. So thanks again, and we'll see you on our Tabletop Assault Battle Report.